ranker in the Assembly Education Committee, Assemblyman Smith, along with Assemblyman Ardilla from Queens, and Assemblyman Pirazzolo from Staten Island. No? Did I get that right? Okay. And well, first of all, Section 202 of the Education Law provides for the election by the legislature of members of the Board of Regents. There are a total of 17 regents throughout the state, 13 by judicial districts within the state, and 4 at large. Today, we're interviewing 3 positions. On April 1st, 2023, the terms of 2 of the regents members will expire. 1 member from the Judicial District number 11, representing Queens County, and 1 member from Judicial District 12, representing Bronx County. Additionally, there is a vacancy in Judicial District 7, representing Cayuga, Livingston, Monroe, Ontario, Seneca, Steuben, Wayne, and Yates counties. The law further provides that regents must be elected by concurrent resolution of the legislature or by a joint session of the legislature. The Board of Regents oversees the entire educational enterprise of the state of New York. The board's most prominent role is setting learning standards for elementary and secondary education. But the Board of Regents also regulates 55 licensed professionals and registers academic programs at all colleges and universities, including SUNY and CUNY. Also within the purview of the Board of Regents are public libraries, museums, historical societies, the state library, the state archives, public broadcasting, vocational rehabilitation, and the regulation of proprietary vocational schools. The Board of Regents derives its authority from the New York State Constitution and education law. Specifically, Section 207 of the Education Law grants the Board of power to exercise legislative functions concerning educational policies and to establish rules for implementing those policies. We ask all candidates will give a brief statement, opening remark. I emphasize brief, okay? And then followed by questions from the assembled elected representatives here. We have also been joined on the Assembly side from Assemblyman Stacey Fefer-Amato, okay? And we have another member over here, Assemblyman Smolin, who has also entered. And so now I want to turn it over to my Senate colleague, Senator Mayer, if you have any opening comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and it's a pleasure to be here with my colleague, Senator Toby Stavisky, Chair of the Committee on Higher Education, and I expect additional members of the State Senate will join us. It's always a very important part of our job, interviewing and recommending and then endorsing candidates for the Board of Regents. One of the most important bodies in determining education policy for every child of this state, and in fact, many adults, because it has much broader jurisdiction than K through 12, and something that both legislative bodies, the Assembly and the Senate, work very closely with the State Education Department and the Board of Regents with the goal of having the highest achievements for our students and highest professional standards for our professionals. So it's an honor to be here. We look forward to the brief presentation of each of the candidates, asking some questions, obviously very respectful of the fact that people are putting themselves forward in this voluntary position, which has great responsibility and frankly great impact on our state. So thank you for those who put their names ahead, and I look forward to hearing any statements if that's okay with you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Senator Mayor, thank you. And Senator Stavisky, do you have anything you want to say?
Yes, I can. There it is. Thank you all for coming, and to those two regents, thank you for your service. As we sit here in the Assembly parlor, you can't help but go back to the founding of our nation. In the early days, during the colonial period, the Board of Regents was established. And we've had some wonderful, wonderful regents in the past. You are following in a tradition that included, among other people, Alexander Hamilton. So today we are going to listen to what you have to say, but understand that you are part of a wonderful tradition, and you are continuing to carry that torch forward, and we thank you for your service.
Thank you, Senator.
I was a history teacher at one time, so I apologize.
No apologies needed. Assemblywoman Fahey, any opening remarks?
I think I may be the newest chair here of the four chairs, but not new to the regents and to the extraordinary role that the Board of Regents play in this state with guiding us on education, on a host of professions and licensing and more. I appreciated the reminder of the history from our colleague, Senator Stavisky, because in so many ways, as we look back at the history, we are at even just as challenging a time just over the last few years as we are still recovering. Our families, our students, and more are still recovering from the trauma of COVID. And I think we're seeing that play out at all levels of our education system. So I'm looking forward to hearing more about that. So it makes this role and your service all the more important. So we thank you for the service that you have given us over these last few years, and we appreciate your interest in being here this morning as you desire to continue. But I think the challenges are as great now as ever, and look forward to hearing more. So with that, I'll turn it back over to our chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fahey. Ranker on the Education Committee, Assemblyman Smith, do you have anything you want to say?
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for joining us today, Regent. We're going to be spending some time today speaking with people who would like to serve our state in this great capacity. It is a volunteer role, and it always inspires myself and a lot of our colleagues, I think, that people would pledge their time to help educate over 3 million students across our state. And something that we always like to say during this process is that there's no litmus test. This is not the Inquisition, but that we do enjoy taking time to have a conversation across the kitchen table with people who are interested in serving. So thank you, and looking forward to a good day.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. All our chairs have spoken. Our ranker has spoken. There are still more, 3, 4 more assembly people who are here. I don't know if
Our
you...
ranker on higher ed is here as well, Mr. Smolin.
Oh, you know what? I still recognize you as a assemblyman, sir.
Yes, he is a ranking member of the higher ed.
Oh, ranker of higher ed. I'm sorry. My apologies.
We're
Mr.
all new.
Smolin.
We're all new.
Mr. Smolin, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm Robert Smolin. I'm the ranking member on the Higher Education Committee from the Assembly. I really appreciate the opportunity to participate in these interviews today. It's been said by my colleagues, but the oversight of the state's education system is very important. It's very near and dear to my heart. As someone who was educated in the public education system, the first person in my immediate family to go to school, to be commissioned in the Marine Corps and ROTC to serve our country, but then to be able to come back and interact with the people across this great, broad, diverse state that we have, and particularly in our education arena, is very important. So I thank all of you for your service. For Regent Chin, thank you so much, and we look forward to the testimony and questions today.
Mr. Smolin, thank you very much. Regent Chin. my apologies. No other person's going to have to go through all of this, okay, before you go to it. But since you're the first one, that's the way it goes, okay? With all the chair people and the rankers speaking, maybe it's time for us to actually begin, okay? And it's basically a conversation here. Please, give us an opening remark of what you've done and why we should re-up you. And after about 5 or 6 minute interview, you telling us, we'll open it up for questions from the panel here, okay? No, there's a button on.
Try it again.
Testing?
There we go.
Okay. Thank you so much for your comments, and good morning, honorable members of the New York State Assembly and Senate. I thank you very much for the opportunity to interview with you, and as I seek an additional 5-year term for the position of Board of Regents representing Judicial District 11. I was first elected to the board in 2015 for a 3-year term, and then elected in 2018 for a 5-year term. I am quite honored to be the first Asian American elected to serve on the New York State Board of Regents. Having served the past 8 years, I have been deeply committed to academic excellence and equity, improving access and broadening inclusion for all students. I am a lifelong career educator, having served the students and school communities in New York City for over 37 years. I have collective experiences at the school, district, central, and state level. And I am a parent and a grandparent, so I'm very well attuned to what is happening in the schools. Under the visionary and transformational leadership of Chancellor Lester Young and Commissioner Betty Rosa, I currently serve as the co-chair for P12 committee. Many of the issues are exactly what Senator Fahey was talking about. We have been dealing with addressing the profound impact of the COVID-19 and what it has had on the lives of our members of the school community, especially our students. I also serve as the co-chair for the Standards and Assessment Work Group. And we have been exploring the assessments that will best reflect the instruction that is happening in the classroom and truly, authentically capturing what our students know and what they are able to do. Most recently, I was assigned as the co-chair for the Blue Ribbon Commission for Graduation Measures. The commission is comprised of 64 professionals. They are stakeholders, and they are charged with rethinking what our high school diploma signifies and make recommendations to the board on new measures of achievement and making sure that it will better serve our diverse student population as we prepare them for the 21st century. Additionally, I serve as a member of the Higher Education, Adult Career and Continuing Education Services, and the Ethics Committee, as well as serving on the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Work Group. I feel I have faithfully served as a board member with integrity, passion, and dedication. My focus is and will always be what is in the best interest of our students, parents, and members of the school community. And given the opportunity, I will continue to do so. So thank you so very much for listening to me.
Thank you very much. Questions? Pat, Ms. Fahey, do you have one?
Sure, thank you. Thank you again, Regent. I think they've got to restart the clock here. Not sure if anybody is watching that. Thank you, and again, thank you for your service and for being here this morning. So many questions. I'll try to keep this concise because I know we have a busy day here. Yes, I've already mentioned COVID, and you mentioned, thank you, the Blue Ribbon Commission. So we understand, and more nationally, but I'm hearing it locally as well as statewide, we have estimates of 10, in some areas, 10 to 12% of students are missing, quote unquote, from our schools. That's one number I've heard locally. Nationally, I've heard it's over 1 million, hearing various ranges around the state of what it might be. Either way, we have not, there are many children who are quote unquote missing, and I know the New York Times has been doing a number of pieces on this as well as others. So what do we do to change to really reclaim those students, address the serious trauma that we are seeing is just endemic across the system, whether it's the mental health challenges or more. And then while we try to reclaim them, we are seeing the drops in enrollment in our K-12 or pre-K-12, which is not a good projection for higher ed where I now sit. And we're seeing those drops of enrollment and assume. So any comments on what specifically you see that will be changed, and then how you do that in light of the Blue Ribbon Commission and maintain that rigor that New York State is so known for with the Regents diploma. So it's a long-winded question. I apologize, but if you can kind of tackle both of those, I would appreciate it, Regent.
The loss of student enrollment is directly impacted by the COVID, and many of our families decided to go elsewhere because they felt that at that time they wanted in-person learning, and they were not afforded that opportunity in New York City, and in some districts across the state. We need to build more trust in our schools so they will return to New York City. But I will say, not only New York City, but New York State, we offer much more opportunities than many other school districts outside of New York City. And it's our hope that we will regain that trust by offering many more opportunities of advanced learning for the students, and as well as addressing the many needs that they may have had when the COVID-19 impacted on them. And one of them that you had mentioned was about mental health. We need to partner with our agencies. The schools alone cannot address these issues. So there are outside agencies that must partner with us in order to address the trauma that has happened. We, as educators in the classrooms, we don't always understand what has happened with families and all, and it is our job in order to be able to help these children address their needs so they can indeed focus on learning. And I think that's really the key here, is that these children are not learning in an isolation. They need to, in some ways, come to school ready and prepared to learn. And they must be able to address and resolve all these social issues, the health issues that are happening in their homes. And we do need outside help and resources to target the kind of services that our students need. With higher education, you had mentioned about the Blue Ribbon Commission. We have stakeholders across the board from every level of the professions, in business, in education, in higher ed, as well as in businesses. These are folks that are painstakingly revisiting our graduation requirements and saying, are these program requirements and the measures and assessment, are they indeed measuring or even signifying what our students need to know and be able to do once they leave us? We must prepare them for career, college, as well as civic readiness. We're not prepared at this time to even guess what is ahead of them. There are jobs that the 21st century will be imposing on us that we're not even preparing our students for. It is so key that we provide them with skills, and believe it or not, these are non-technical skills. They need to be learn to be collaborative. They need to have communication skills. They need to have to work with others. They have to have personal, in some way, self-motivation in order to be able to adjust to the jobs that will be coming at us in the future. So it's not always about teaching them coursework and testing them. So it's really important that we really come up with recommendations, that the commission come up with recommendations to the board to see how we can change what students need and be able to do, should need to know and be able to do in order to be prepared for the next step in life.
Regent Chin, thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Mayer?
Good morning, Regent Chin, and thank you. Thank you for your service. I have 3 questions. I'll put them, try together. One is, as you know, the legislature has worked very hard with the governor to ensure there's full funding of foundation aid, and we're in the 3rd year of that commitment, which is a profound shift in the way New York has actually delivered to every public school. I think one thing that our constituents want to know is, as we fight for and deliver these funds and the federal funds that came through COVID, how can the regents help us ensure that the performance of our students, and I don't mean solely ELA and math scores or graduation requirements, that we are doing a better job of ensuring our children leave the public education system with the highest degree of proficiency to exist in a civic world, whatever they choose to do, a trade or whatever. So I think translating this continued commitment to fund into successful outcomes is one thing I'm interested in your thoughts on. Secondly, I think you may have heard during the budget hearing, some of our colleagues really pressed the commissioner on what the regents are doing about the way reading is taught in the public schools. And certainly as co-chair of the P through 12 committee, this is an issue that I think many of the people we represent are concerned that the regents need to be more forward-thinking in reforming the way reading is taught to some of our students. And thirdly, on the DEI framework, which I'm extremely appreciative of the leadership of the regents. Thank you very much for coming up with a framework that I think a vast majority of our schools can comply with, but not all of them are complying, and I could say even in my district. So I'm interested in your thoughts on, you gave broad parameters and you gave discretion to local school districts, and some districts have really risen to the challenge of defining how they want DEI to roll out, not just on issues of race alone, on all the issues, including disability and commitment to equity, but the performance of all districts is not equal, and I wondered your thoughts. I know you are from New York City, which is the king or queen of our school districts, but we have all these other districts that have a long way to go.
So I'll take them a little out of order if you don't mind. Okay. So regarding DEI, when we first presented our policy on DEI, we were fully aware of the fact that there are districts that are doing this work already. And so, and I will say to you that, that those that are doing this work are flourishing. What we've done with the DEI is to identify the districts that have been doing this work and showcasing how this work has benefited the students and the school and the members of the school community. We have done presentations in the past year or so, and we have provided resources to, the State Ed Department has provided resources directly to the schools. And we're finding that there is that willingness to want to do it. You know, in the superintendents, the leaderships of these school districts want to do it. They just need to be shown how to do it. And I think learning from their, from neighboring communities has helped them in guiding them to the path that they want to go into. And ultimately, I truly believe that educators across the board truly want to do what's in the best interests of our students. When you're talking about reading, how reading is taught, children learn in many, many different ways. There is no one-size-fits-all. If there were, we would be doing it. But it's so important that the teachers are given the many kind of skills and have it in their repertoire in order to be able to address these, the skills of these children. What we need to do much better is about identifying interventions. When we identify that a child is struggling with reading, we need to be able to come up with the type of strategies and approaches in reading that will help them. I will say that phonics, New York City is really big on phonics. Phonics is definitely a way to start children on the path of, to read. It helps them decode words, but reading is much, much more deeper than that. It is about not only decoding words, but it's about understanding and comprehension. And what we need to do if we are to create a world of literate society, we also have to make sure that they have the learning experiences that are associated with reading. And many a times that there are communities that are not exposed to the vast learning experiences by seeing the world beyond their communities, and I think that is really important. But I do want to note that the State Ed Department does not dictate curriculum. That is done at a local level. But once again, what we do is showcase promising practices across the state and hoping that others will investigate, explore, and look for the best possible avenue so that they will do what's best for their children, especially in reading. But math is also one of the areas that has been losing progress as a result of the COVID-19. So those are the two challenges that we're faced with. And this year, there is a new standardized testing a form that in many ways will give us a baseline of where we are at this time as we move forward. Lastly, when you talked about foundation aid, we thank you all so much for fully funding it for the last year. But I understand that the foundation aid formula is truly outdated. And there is a need to hear from the field, all our stakeholders, especially our superintendents and principals, as how we move forward as we develop a new formula as we, that will address all the needs of our students, especially those that are struggling. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Senator Stravinsky, you have a question, or do you? No, Senator, I thought you did. Okay, Mr. Smith, I think you do.
Yes, she does.
Oh, excuse me, Mr. Smith? Let's not argue, okay? Go ahead, Senator.
That should be our worst dispute. Yeah. Welcome back, Regent Shin. Full disclosure, the Regent is a constituent of mine, but I have known her for many years. Going back, I think it was to your service as the superintendent in District 25.
Yes.
School district representing the area where I live. My son went through District 25, and we thank you for your years of service. I think Assemblymember Fahey made an interesting point when she asked you about issues that are important in pre-K through 12, but also for college students, for higher education. And it's my feeling, and I think others on the panel, that we've got to consider education from pre-K or 3K or whatever to postgraduate, that it is one seamless transition. And one of the most difficult problems we face in higher education is the decline in enrollment that the Assemblywoman referred to. But I don't think it's the fault of the colleges. I think it's the fault of the high schools, et cetera, where in New York City, I think the number they cite is we're down 100,000 students. Very troubling. My question, though, is really, that's the past, and we are looking to the future. You've been a regent, you've served on this prestigious board. What do you hope to accomplish if the legislature re-elects you to this position? What, something new, new initiatives, et cetera?
To address the higher ed enrollment issue, I truly believe that the cost of colleges, of the tuition, has played a major part in the enrollment. I will say that I have three grandchildren. Two of them are 2 years away from going to college, and when you think about it, you say to a family that is faced with budgetary constraints, they could easily, at the end of the day or end of the children's career, owe about close to $100,000 of loans. There must be a way that, perhaps, and that does not, for the State Ed Department and for the Board of Regents, is how we can, in some ways, regulate the tuition. And I know that that's political in many ways, and it's also financially challenging for colleges. So I will say that the greatest obstacle is how we overcome the cost of college. I will also say that members of the commission, the Blue Ribbon Commission, has also come to recognize that all students are not on the pathway for college. They will choose career. And what we have not done well is provide a pathway for those students to choose a career. Career technical education has not received the type of resources, the support that it does need to support those students that have chosen a different pathway, than college. There are two wonderful high schools in Queens, and I'm very proud to say they are in Queens, is the Aviation High School and the Thomas Edison High School, which are both CTE schools. If you have never visited these schools, you must. The preparation that they provide to prepare our students in particular careers is extraordinary. And I think that's what we need to do in order to make sure that we honor the choices our students and families make when they choose a pathway that's different from going to college.
May I just add, I am so happy you mentioned Thomas Edison. Number one, it's in my new district, and number two, I taught there.
I didn't know that, so that was not staged.
You don't have to sell me on Great school.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. I want to acknowledge that Assemblyman Otis has joined us, thank you. And listen, I will, at this particular point, just say our 20 minutes that was allotted us has gone already by on the wayside, and we still have a number of questions to ask. So, number one, please, my colleagues, try to make your questions quicker, briefer, and with all due respect, Madam Regent, see if you also can be a little more concise in your answers, just so, because we'll be here all day long and we'll never get out. But with that, I'll go to the ranker on the Assembly Education Committee, Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We're also joined by Assemblyman Scott Gray. Scott, if you want to sit up here, you're welcome to. Yeah, we have a chair here if you'd like. Yeah, I think the timer might be having the opposite effect, so I'll try to keep this really brief. Regent, thank you for your service. You mentioned being part of the graduation measures and discussions about this. My district on Long Island, over the last several years, has had one of the highest opt-out rates for state exams. About 75% of the students in my district are not taking the state exams. It's not because their parents don't think their students are going to do well. It's because their parents don't see value in these state tests. I'm not talking about the Regents, as you know, we're talking about the lower levels, and they want to send us a message here in Albany, and also because they want to change. So to that question, when we're talking about exit exams for high school in a way that we can assess students, and it's a two-part question because I'll let you expand, we are looking at teacher accountability, and these parents don't believe it's accurate to hold their teachers account for these state tests that they feel are flawed. So that's number one. How do we make sure teachers are accountable because they want to be held accountable? I was a former teacher. A lot of us were. We take pride in what we do. And then the second part is how can we ensure that we're making sure students have the information they need to be successful, but if they're not good test takers, it's a bit lost on that. So if you could speak to that.
So I have visited the schools out on Long Island, and I do understand the situation there. So for me to be very brief, the APBR, the opt-out was as a result of basically linking or coupling the tests with teacher evaluation. And I will say very quickly, it is totally wrong. Okay, that's all. I'll answer that one.
Thank you. I agree with you.
And for exit exams for high school, I will tell you, just as a preview of what we're already hearing from the members of the commission, that since we know that children are learning differently, they also show that it also lends itself to say that they should be assessed differently. So we're looking at possible different measures of evaluating students as they exit high school. And it does not mean that we will be rolling out the Regents, but it will be one of the options in ways to demonstrate that they are proficient in the areas that they've been learning in. So we're looking at different pathways of how children exit high school. And I will say that we will hear those recommendations very shortly at the end of the year.
Okay, great. And I think if there's any way we could be helpful, I think generally, speaking for myself, but I think a lot of us would be interested in seeing that. I know when I studied to be a teacher, we embraced differentiated instruction, teaching kids how they learn. And it seemed for a while we were kind of going away from that, teaching one size fits all. So thank you for your answers.
And I just wanted to add that the best way to measure how students are learning is through interim assessments. And I think Long Island has done a wonderful job in doing that.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Fefa Amato, do you have a question?
I do. Thank you very much. Thank you, Regent Chin, for being here, and thank you for your service. I've been listening, right? So as much as we're questioning you, I love the words that you're using in your answers to us. Civic readiness, hands-on collaboration. I think this is the 21st century students that we're talking about. And to my colleagues up here that were teachers, as the paraprofessional of the team here, I also like the fact that you always talk about that students learn differently. So for a question for going forward, I have just two quick ones. As far as what else do you see going in the future? I love your answer about the exit exams at Regents different choices, but just for students that learn differently, what else do you see as the future of that being brought into the work that you're doing, that we can have classrooms that do differentiate, that we really do embrace that? Because going along what you said before about the trauma that we have from COVID, some of our students, parents might not even realize that the students are now learning differently. So just touch on a few things that you see as maybe some standards of things going forward that we could bring that into the classroom. And the other part is adding to that is about cultural responsiveness. We know there's a lot of changes if it's in non-public schools, anti-Semitism, anti-Asian acts, and how are we bringing some cultural responsiveness into our policies in our schools? Thanks.
On the question of how we would change what's happening in the classroom, I would say that when we change, let me start over. Assessments will drive the type of instruction that's going on in the classroom. I am a true believer that performance-based assessments are the only way to really, truly assess what a child knows and is able to do. So that even the College Board is changing the format of testing, and as part of it is performance-based assessment. When you do performance-based assessment, you test a child verbally, you test them how they write. They must do research, they must be collaborative. These are all types of skills that they must need in order to enter the workforce. So I truly believe that this is the way to go, and that's what I'm looking forward to. There have been many successful schools that are using this method, and we just need to make sure that we start building the capacity of our schools to do this work. And I think that's the direction and the future of our classroom teaching and learning. When you're talking about culturally responsiveness, it is, I'll make it as short as I can. When I went to elementary school, there was only 3 families of minorities, me being one of them. I never saw myself in any of the textbooks, in the teachers that stood in front of me. And I will tell you that the only book that I read was 3 Chinese Brothers. That was it. I hope we've come a long way, but we have a long way to go on this. Children must see themselves reflected in schools, in the curriculum, in the books, in the teachers that they interact with. And I think that is key. Perhaps then we have a brighter future in the next generation that's coming up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Assemblyman Smolin.
Well, thank you very much for coming today, Regent Chen. We appreciate your service, and we look forward to perhaps to some of your future service to New York. One of the big things from the pandemic that's really stuck out in my mind is remote and online learning, and what it means not only for the K through 12, but also the college system, the SUNY, CUNY, the community colleges. Do you believe that online or remote learning is substantially equivalent to in-person learning?
No, I do not. I think there is great value in face-to-face, especially for young children. I think that we have not even seen the effects of what remote learning has impacted on the development of the youngest children. There is value in online and remote learning for perhaps colleges, perhaps for high schools, but definitely not totally for middle schools and elementary schools. There is this human element that teachers bring to their students, and it's really, I will tell you, how many of you, if I asked you at this time, who has impacted most on your lives that was once a teacher, you will always name one person, and I will tell you, that's what perhaps motivated me to go in the direction I wanted to go. And I think that is what was missing and will be missing if we just go online and remote learning.
Great, thank you for that. I have some follow-on questions that I'll ask offline in that regard. It's very important to me in a couple areas. Second question, very briefly. We have a new chancellor at SUNY, and in your role in the Board of Regents is overseeing the university system and your membership on the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee within the Board of Regents. Does the Board of Regents see itself as having a role in approving the now mandatory DEI curriculum that SUNY is going to require of all graduates?
No, it's really difficult to say that things should be mandated. because at that point, but when folks are not totally, perhaps has bought into certain policies, they're reluctant in some ways to implement it. So mandate is a word that I will say that most educators do not want to hear. I think it's really important that that in some ways they are shown the value of why it's important. And I think educators do know that it is very important that we address the diversity, the equity, and inclusion in all schools. So I think it's in some ways it needs to be encouraged. And I think, and that we, in some ways, in many ways, showcase to them what are the most promising practices in order to do this. And many of them, as I said before, they're not sure how to go about doing it. And I think it needs to be explored, and it needs to be in some ways, you need to be the buy-in of the parents, the community, especially the teachers who are directly impacted or will have direct implications on what's happening in the classroom.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have been joined by Assemblywoman Heineman. Thank you very much. And we have one last question from Mr. Pirazzolo.
Good morning, Regent Chin. Thank you very much for being here today. I listened intently to what you had, and I just want to have some conversations on some of the things that you said. We spoke about parents taking their children out of schools, and you had said that in-person learning is one reason. Another reason, at least from my district or all throughout New York City, is what's being taught in our schools, and specifically I'll focus on sexual education curriculum. There are some parents that think that our schools are more working with social policies and not the very serious academic issues that we already have. As you know, being from New York City, there are so many of our schools where our children don't read or write or do math at grade level. So the question is it really more important to be going into those social issues and staying focused on what students need to prepare themselves for high school and definitely prepare themselves for college? In my district, which is Staten Island, and throughout a lot of districts in the city, a lot of parents have opted to take their children out of public schools for various reasons, maybe like the two that we stated. But those parents fortunately had the ability to do that. There are so many districts where parents do not have the ability, and that brings me to my next question, which would be charter schools. As a Board of Regent, you sit on a board that can approve charter schools licensing. So I'd like to hear from you on your thoughts there also.
Charter schools it's also a very controversial issue among the members of the Board of Regents. I will say that there should always be choice for parents. There should be options of where they want to send their children. I think it's their right to do so. Charter school happens to be one of those options. But the challenge with charter schools that many of us are very, very fearful of is the fact is that the way it is being implemented and advanced is competing with our public schools. There's tremendous loss of funds as a result of that. Charter schools were always intended to offer something different than what public schools can offer. That has not happened. Many of these schools, charter schools, are competing. They're doing exactly the same. They're offering the same type of curriculum, teaching and instruction that as public schools are. That sets up a competition. So when we look at charter schools at this time, we have to look at what is the innovative, what is different about these charter schools that we're offering these parents an option to then go to. As a result of many of these, and I will say this, that the Board of Regents has also looked at, been reviewing these charter schools, and some of them are failing. They're not even doing as a good a job as the public schools. in those cases, we take a real hard look as to whether or not we should shut them down. But we do offer them support because they are indeed, they're not just numbers that we're dealing with. There are students, there are families that have entrusted their children's education to charter schools. So we must do everything we can do to help them at least get to a level where they are then meeting the grade levels that they should be meeting at. But in many ways, I really feel that as we move forward, there is this talk of increasing the number of charter schools in New York City. I really feel it is the wrong choice.
If I, can we get into the sexual ed curriculum? I know that you don't do it, you don't specifically say what curriculum should be used. Using your words, you talk about promising practices. So, you know, are you in favor of what's currently being taught in our schools?
I'm sorry, the question's about curriculum?
Well, so one of the other parts of my question was about the sexual education curriculum that's being taught in our schools. And while you said you don't directly dictate what curriculum is, you do have promising practices. And I was suggesting that's another reason why so many families have decided to take their children out, because we're promoting social issues rather than educational priorities.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, I missed the question there. You cannot expect that a child can come to school ready to learn if they have issues, if they have social issues. So it's really important that we address both the social issues as well as the academic issues of students, so that it is, so we must be able to address and then provide services and to these students in order to be able to make sure that they're prepared to go to class and to learn. As a matter of fact, there was a presentation just recently, I think it was just the other day, regarding how some of these students come to like a safe room in order to talk out their issues before, knowing that they're not ready to go into the classrooms to learn. So we realize that even students are struggling because of whatever things are happening to them individually, from home, from their friends. So they must be able to talk out those issues before they are prepared to learn in the classroom. So I believe, I must say that it has to go hand in hand.
Thank you, Madam Regent. And I must apologize, I did say one last question, but we do have one more from Ms. Hidman. Please. Ms. Hyndman.
Regent Chin, I know it's been a long morning, so just very quickly. Being that you serve as a member of the Higher Education and Access and Ethics Committees, one of the things we've talked about a lot is that there's a lack of teachers, there's a lack of teacher diversity, teachers are leaving the state of New York. Are there any programs that exist now within SED that are helping to create a teacher pipeline? And is that, or are any of those discussions happening about how we attract our young people into going to the teaching profession? Are there any programs that exist now or any being created in order to make that happen? Thank you. Thank you, Chair Benedetto.
Okay. First of all, I'd like to thank the governor for the $30 million that she has given the state to address some of the teacher shortage areas that we're faced with. There is a Teacher Opportunity Corps that we receive funding in order to recruit underrepresented groups to become teachers, and I think that is one option that we have. I will say that, and this is to Assemblywoman Amato, who was a paraprofessional. I truly believe there should be a career ladder for paraprofessionals, and I don't think we do a good job of doing that at all. There is a need to, in many ways, address loan forgiveness. Teaching salaries are not as high as they should be, and it's a profession, and yet we do not pay our teachers well, and I think that is really a key here. There is one wonderful program that is not always funded as much as we would like it to be. It's called the residency program, where student candidates that want to become teachers are actually paid to do an internship in the schools. And once they finish their internship, they then are assigned a school. So these teachers then get paid while they're doing their internship. I think that is really key. The State Ed Department has also addressed some of the teacher shortages also by creating flexibility in teacher certification. And so that they have different routes to choose from. And we've also revisited some of the teacher certification exams that have been instituted. In many ways, it's because they've become redundant in their concept, let me put it that way. So I believe that those were many ways. And I would love to see that perhaps there are schools like what we call early college schools that focus in on developing teachers at the high school level, and then it becomes seamless for them to become teachers once they graduate. And I think that would be some different ways to address those issues.
Thank you very much, Regent. We have been joined by Senator John Liu, who's chairperson of the New York City Senate Education Committee. And Senator Liu just wants to say hello.
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 Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Regent Chin. It is always a pleasure to see you. Apologies for my not being here for the entire meeting. We have a Finance Committee conducting budget hearings going on, and we were talking with Mayor Adams about, you guessed it, education.
Right.
In any event, I don't have any questions for you. I just want my colleagues to know that Judith Chin is a fellow Queensian, and she and I speak on a regular basis. In fact, she is a major source of wisdom and knowledge for me personally, as well as in my role as a state senator, and I value her experience, really. I hope that, well, I certainly will support you in your continuing pursuit to stay as a regent. Queens needs you, and the state of New York needs you. Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Regent Chin, I thank you so much for your time. I know you only expected to be here like 20 minutes, and we've kept you almost an hour, and we appreciate your patience.
Has it been that long?
And time flies when you're having fun. I thank you very much for being here.
Thank you
and
so much.
Have a good day.
Okay, you too. Thank you.
We will have our next regent candidate, Regent Aramina Vega Ferrer, coming in a second. She became a regent 2 years ago at this time with the vacancy that was created by Regent Rosa being transferred over to Commissioner of Education, okay? And we have been served over the last 2 years by Ms. Ferrer. Ms. Ferrer is with us today, and I welcome you here, Regent Ferrer. We are just having a conversation, maybe a little lengthy conversation, but a conversation nonetheless, and not an inquisition, and that's for sure. And I want you to realize that. We're all here to ask a few questions, but first we want to hear a brief statement from you and what you've been doing and why we should re-elect you to your position. And after you have done that, we will open the floor for some questioning from us. I just urge you as much as possible to be brief and concise, and we'll try to do that in our questions and hopefully your answers. And at that, why don't you tell us?
Okay, thank you. Good morning, Assembly members and senators. It has been my privilege to serve as your appointee on the Board of Regents for the past 2 years, representing the 12th Judicial District, the Bronx. I'm seeking reappointment to a full 5-year term so I may continue this important work and leadership role, which I have undertaken with great enthusiasm and commitment on behalf of all students, educators, and professionals throughout New York State. During my 2 years of service as Regent, I have come to recognize the tremendous impact the educational policy decisions the Board of Regents has on the scope and quality of the programs offered to our students throughout our schools, grades pre-K through college, to meet the challenges of our times with regard to teaching and learning both inside and outside of schools. My tenure as Regent has taken place during and in the wake of the pandemic, and I believe this crisis has given us a rare glimpse into the educational deficit students at all levels face across our state. This was especially true for our students with special needs, our English language learners, our low-income students, without much regard to where they lived and learned throughout our state, whether in urban, suburban, or rural communities. It became apparent to all of us, as parents, students, educators, and all stakeholders and partners in education, that there was a digital divide. This, at a time when we all agree that 21st century learning and careers require access and training in technology and the internet. The digital divide during the pandemic became the symbol of the uneven distribution of educational tools and resources for students to learn inside and outside of the classroom. Today, all policy decisions and guidance to the field from the Regents are developed through the lens of our diversity, equity, and inclusion framework and policy statement, which addresses the instructional needs of all students in New York State. In my first year, I was part of the newly formed DEI work group that developed this policy statement. Chancellor Lester Young appointed me to serve on the following steering committees: the Cultural Education Committee, on which I serve as co-chair with Regent Tillis, P12 Education, Higher Education, Audits, Budget, and Finance, and Subcommittee for State Aid. I also serve on 2 work groups: Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, which I mentioned previously, and the Standards and Assessment. Most recently, I was appointed to serve on the New York State Graduation Measures Blue Ribbon Commission. I believe the most important work for the Regents going forward is reviewing the recommendations the Blue Ribbon Commission will make this fall, in reimagining what students need to learn to graduate from high school. The most satisfying part for me in my work as a Regent is visiting schools in the Bronx and throughout the state, speaking directly with students and parents and teachers, and observing best teaching practices and instructional programs that inform my understanding of what is going on in our schools today. It would be the honor of a lifetime to continue to serve the Bronx community on the Board of Regents, especially at this inflection point when we are thoughtfully examining and rethinking graduation measures for our diverse student population in New York State. measures that will demonstrate what students know and their readiness for college, career, and civic life. I thank you for your consideration of my application, and I'm very happy to answer any questions you may have.
Regent Farad, thank you very much for that opening statement. Assemblywoman Fahey.
Thank you, Regent. And again, we thank you for your past service, and thank you for stepping up to apply to continue that service. It is appreciated, especially as was noted by my colleague, you are a volunteer. A couple of questions really tying into a little bit of what you said. COVID, we each gave some opening remarks. COVID, I think we are still paying the price of COVID, and of course we're still not out of it, but we've paid a price with missing students all across the country. Estimates are all over the map. But I've seen percentages of 10% here locally or more, and hundreds of thousands, if not over 1 million across the country, let alone in New York. What specifically, you mentioned the digital divide. I think it was a lot more than a digital divide, but that was certainly part of it. Even those that had the digital access, I think it has fueled isolation, it's fueled mental health issues, and a lot of these students, many of these students, I should say, are not coming back. So if you can give us some specifics on what we're going to do to turn around that picture. I'm the new higher ed chair in the Assembly, and the enrollment drops at elementary, secondary are certainly fueling what are projected to be continued enrollment drops, SUNY, CUNY, and more. So it's having a negative effect on the continuum. So what specifically are we going to do? And then while we try to reclaim students and really address the issues of the trauma of COVID, you mentioned you're on the Blue Ribbon panel. What specifically are we going to do to make sure we maintain the levels of rigor that New York State is so known for?
Okay, thank you for that
Thank you, Regent.
question. There's a lot to cover there.
Yes.
I focused on the digital divide because it was the most apparent to everyone.
Sure.
But of course, we have the fallout now. So when children came back into the classrooms, they were distressed, and they didn't come back into the classrooms right away. So their emotional needs, we as adults suffered. So imagine students, as little as kindergartners, coming back into a school setting, and some of them still wearing masks. It was a scary time. So certainly, we are taking care right now of the emotional needs of our students as they come back into school. Emotions are attached to behavior. And so we do have more supports in school, more guidance counselors, more parent engagement. Academically, I know that we poured a lot of money into after-school programs and into summer enrichment programs. We need to do that. But at the same time, when I speak to students, they're talking about the things that would encourage them to come back to school, which are the arts, because I'm on the cultural committee. Infusing the arts, bringing them back, because kids are telling us they don't understand why they're coming to school. So we have to get them excited about coming back to school. CTE programs, I'm a big proponent of them. I've mentioned it before. And we at the Regents are really pushing forth CTE programs. We have excellent programs, excellent models in New York State. We need to replicate them in every school. We really do. We need to start earlier. We need to get kids working with their hands and involved with tools other than their phones, right? So that's one tool. The other thing is that although students are very savvy with social media, we are not teaching them how to work with technology. They're not sophisticated. So employers want sophisticated young people coming into the workforce that can help them move their businesses forward with technology. They have to have those tools. So the Blue Ribbon Commission, to tie into that, we're looking at all of that now. And that Blue Ribbon Commission consists of 64 members in all different walks of life. So in the business world, we have the arts represented, we have parents represented, we have students represented, we have leadership represented from schools. And right now, we're examining everything. I'm not going to present any specifics, but I will tell you that the arts are popping up, CTE is popping up, world languages are popping up, and building on strengths. If children are coming in speaking a language, they should be bilingual, and they should get credit for that advanced knowledge they have in another language. And what students are telling me, and I have to tell you, our students are so sophisticated. I'm amazed at how sophisticated our students are throughout the state in articulating that they want choices. They don't want a single track. They want to be able to engage in some CTE activities. They want the arts. They want to be excited about coming to school. We have a moment to make all of that happen for our children.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Senator Mayer.
Good morning, and I apologize for being out. There's a lot happening in the Capitol today.
Good morning.
Including the mayor of the city of New York is testifying at a hearing. And the mayor of Yonkers is coming next. So thank you just briefly for your focus on arts and the absolute urgency of enhancing our arts curriculum. I really appreciate that. Your continued focus on bilingual education and the needs of our ELL students, particularly in the communities outside the city of New York, where we continue to have very significant growth in ELL and bilingual education needs. So I have less of a question. I appreciate your leadership on those important issues. And I hope that, particularly in the arts, where we don't have mandates, which I know the regents don't like, but some of us think are maybe necessary, to ensure that we provide a robust arts experience for our children. We are simply not doing that, and students are disengaged as a result. So I appreciate your focus on that.
I agree. I'm a very big proponent of the arts, and as a principal of a school in the Bronx, I had to really work very hard to get outside funding from Annenberg Foundation and other sources to provide some experiences through the arts. And I can tell you firsthand how parents would come back to me and say, my child is jumping out of bed in the morning to come to school. My child never did that. And that's what the arts does. It gets kids excited. And I will share one CTE story from a student, I believe his name is Carlos Berrios, from Newburgh, in a CTE high school, who said, on Thursdays, I'm out on my internships. And he said, and there are challenges. And I said, what are they? And he said, well, you know, academically, I have to work really hard those other 4 days. And I said, so are you telling me that that Thursday motivates you for the rest of the week? He said, absolutely. He said, I can't wait for Thursdays to be out in the field. And he was telling me that he had learned graphic design, and he had become his own entrepreneur and had his own little business in graphic design, but he wanted to be an architect, and he can't wait to go into taking some of the courses in electricity and plumbing. And so I thought, I want to be in that school. That's what I thought right away. And it is also a school that children are held to the Regents standards as well. And they have tremendous support. But it was clear to me that students are saying that's the kind of school they want to be in.
Thank you, Regent. Just want to announce that we have been joined by Assemblyman Gandolfo. We welcome you. And we'll go on to Mr. Smith.
Thank you, and thank you, Regent. I think the last time you joined us was right before the whole world shut down, so you've had an interesting tenure on the Regents, and I think you mentioned a lot of those things. So what you just said, I think, is a good segue to kind of my feelings and thoughts and question. You're speaking about an educational experience that inspires students, that lights this passion that drives them to be successful. So, the last Regent, I just asked a question about the way we're graduating students, and I think you touched on it a little bit. I remember my experience when I was a teacher, teaching double period math to 11th and 12th graders, and I remember thinking, as passionate as I am about the quadratic equation and these great things, they were not as passionate. And I felt that they were actually in some ways robbed of the chance to participate. You mentioned, I see in your resume, Eastern Suffolk BOCES, great programs on Long Island. Now, because these students in 11th and 12th grade, their day was occupied by double period math, a phys ed class, social studies, English, double period science, these things, just to pass the Regents to graduate from high school, because we had made some limitations at that time. I thought that was a real shame, because they did have these passions and they were not able to participate in those programs. So can you speak to that a little bit? Now, we're talking about this new pathway to graduation, but keeping the Regents as an option. What are your thoughts on that personally?
Well, again, everything is on the table, but I do listen to voices of students' parents. You know, they're not too, happy that, their students, their children are taking these tests over and over and aren't able to pass it, although they're brilliant students and they don't get it. So we are looking at alternative, performance assessments. Of course, that's something that we're looking at. But I will tell you, a group of students from the Bronx High School of American Studies indicated that, well, some of us really do well on these. We'd like to keep them on the table. And then others said, well, we should have choices if we want a different pathway. For those of us who do well on that, now the Regents themselves have value. The question is whether we should use that as a single measure. So that's on the table with regard to the commission, and they'll be making a final recommendation. But we're exploring everything right now. I will say to you that when everyone says you can't do all these, you can't do the arts, yes, you can, okay? Yes, it can be done. It can be done, and we have models throughout New York State, and we need to take a look at them and visit them. And even in that one school with the student that I mentioned, he said, we're doing all of these things, but what I sensed from this student was that there was also that emotional piece that we talked about, where they're completely supported each and every step of the way. That he said, if we falter, there's someone there to pick us up and say, don't worry, we'll find a way to get you there. So we do still have to focus on that emotional piece, because it's just as important.
I agree with you. Now, I'm looking through your resume. You have extensive experience on literacy.
Absolutely.
That came up the other day at our hearing, that a lot of the members of this body, the Assembly and Senate, had concerns about New York City, but across the state, on how we're teaching students how to learn to read and to be literate. What are, if you're added back onto the Regents for the next 5 years, I'm assuming you would take a leadership role on that, be given, and you probably already have. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Because I'm a literacy expert, and my background is in the preparation of teachers, so I was preparing teachers for reading, and reading with all students. That means in your classroom, you have children with special needs. You have children who are English language learners. So you have to differentiate that instruction, but we have some proven scientific approaches to teaching reading. And I have to tell you, because I have been trained in all approaches and I'm very familiar, I do believe that you need to know all the approaches, but the scientific approaches are tried and true. So definitely, if you're learning a second language, children learn, right? They learn in that foundational way through phonics. But if children speak another language, we're going to use that language as a support. So you have a lot of cognates in other languages, especially Romance languages, as you know. So when children discover that when their parents tell them, I always use this in college, that we have words that we use in Spanish every day, words that are very high-level, sophisticated words. So when a parent says to a child to behave himself or herself, all right, because you have to behave, compórtate. Compórtate is to comport. So to comport oneself is a very high-level word. That's not something we use every day. Please, Johnny, please comport yourself. And so we...
An SAT vocabulary there, but...
Very high level.
One thing that you mentioned, and my time has definitely expired, but that I think was interesting is that we do have students that come in at a young age and they're not fully literate in their first language. So how do you make up the gap? Because you want to teach them English, you want to teach them literacy, but you want them to complete the partial learning, it sounds like, of the other language, because that definitely adds.
As you know, children are capable of learning 2-3 languages within a home.
Yep.
And so we have learned a lot of this natural approach. What is going on in that home? Now, when you're saying literacy, that child is literate because that child is speaking, that child is communicating, very clearly. Obviously, let's just use Spanish for an example, that's the language they understand and hear. And there's nuance to the culture and how you express yourself. So I would definitely be teaching English, phonics, right, to that child. However, there's a point at which you want to make connections all of the time with the native language, or even ask the child, how do you say that? How would you say that in Spanish?
Thank you for the answer, and I just think some of our members seem to think that we need some extra help on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Senator Stravinsky.
Thank you. I must say, as I was listening to you and what you said, I'm impressed with the passion with which you were speaking, and I appreciate that, because I think it demonstrates your interest in continuing to serve and to help the entire state, which sort of leads me to my really quick question. You mentioned you serve on the Higher Education Committee of the Regents, and I chair Higher Ed, as you know, in the Senate. What have the Regents been doing in terms of trying to improve or let people know that higher education is part of a continuum of children, pre-K through college? What has the Higher Education Committee in the Regents been doing?
Actually, that's part of our philosophy, that P20 continuum is part of everything that we're doing now. We're very clear and very focused now. But we are meeting with, of course, we meet with the staff meets with the presidents of the colleges throughout New York State. And we're listening very carefully to what they're saying, and certainly the deans of the schools of education, we're talking very closely with them. And we are partnering because we do see, as a principal in the Bronx, my big complaint was that the colleges are not working directly with our schools. And especially at a time when we're trying to recruit a diverse teaching force, I think we should have our kids in college and they should be in our schools, right? Professors should be working with our kids, getting to know who our kids are and as they come to them, making those transitions much smoother for our students. I also believe in students seeing themselves the P20 continuum. So if I'm in elementary school, I want to see those colleges early on. I want to know that that's where I may want to be. I also want to be able to participate in arts and CTE programs in the event that I want to go off into a different type of career and I need to start planning. In the work of the commission, when we've examined what they do internationally, for example, in Germany, the students by 5th grade have already decided on their career, right? Career path in 5th grade. They have a plan, which is not what I'm prescribing. But nevertheless, very early on, students are already thinking. So that's the good part, that we have to get kids making the connection between school, career, right? Jobs, because that math that you mentioned, that higher math, we don't get it when we're taking those courses. How does this relate? What kind of work would I be doing as a result of, taking these math courses, right? So how is this parallelogram connected to anything I'm going to do in the future? So I think higher ed has a bigger role to play. So we are definitely working very closely with higher ed because they are going to get our children. They have to be part of that pipeline. And they have to be working with our teachers in elementary, middle, not just in the high schools. They have to go into our classrooms and begin to know who the kids are that are coming to their schools.
Thank you. The chancellor, incidentally, was up here yesterday, I think, the day before, of CUNY. And I have discussed this with him many, many times, so I agree. And they have programs where they are reaching out.
Yes, and it's like anything else, and I know that he too believes in doing this work, and they've begun to do some very good work at CUNY and SUNY, but we need to do more.
Thank you. Assemblyman Smolin, you had a question.
I did. Thank you, Chair. Regent Fair, it's really great to see you here. Thank you. I'm the ranker on the Higher Education Committee. But the district I represent is a very rural area in upstate New York. And one of the things that I'm always concerned with is a one-size-fits-all approach to a big, broad, diverse state like New York. You mentioned about the digital divide, and it's particularly acute in the rural areas of upstate New York. And it's not an issue of affordability, it's more an issue of access. The lines just don't exist, they don't go out to people's homes. They go to the schools, but they don't go to people's homes. And what the pandemic, I think, has taught us is that online or remote learning is very different than in-person learning. Could you reflect on whether or not you believe online remote learning is substantially equivalent to in-person learning? And if not, what are the differences?
Okay, I have some expertise here because I did teach at the university level, at the college level, online courses. And so I had to learn myself, having been someone who never learned, virtually. I had to learn how to teach students. What I learned along the way, and I took quite a bit of time to make sure I knew the standards for teaching online and that I was making it comparable to the experience, but I was working with adults. So there's a difference. As adults, we're much more sophisticated and we can do that kind of work. But even at that level, there were students who said, I do much better in face-to-face classroom situations. And just as you said, one size doesn't fit all. We need to look at where children can benefit from the online, but you can't have children working remotely all the time. Absolutely not, because I think you need to be socially engaged. Otherwise, it's very comparable, to homeschooling. But even in homeschooling, there are other siblings, there's a different type of engagement there. When you're learning remotely, you're learning with other students, but you're disengaged. So you don't have that. However, in terms of learning, what I found was that my online students worked harder and did better. Why? Because they didn't have some of those other distractors. But for young children, I do believe that there should be some part of their education. And I understand the situation with the rural students because we talk about that. And I share that with some of our students in New York City. What would you do if you're in a rural area, right? Because now you're in the city. And they never think about that. Like, what do you do there? But I would definitely want in rural areas children to have opportunities to come together. So in that case, I would do some type of blended activity where you're doing both. Because you do need opportunities for the students to be with other children socially.
Thank you for that. A quick follow-up. We have a new chancellor in SUNY, and one of the things that's come out recently is a mandatory diversity, equity, and inclusion class in order to graduate from a SUNY college. What are your thoughts on that?
When you say a class, you mean a course?
Yes.
For all students?
All students.
Okay. I'm not fully, familiar with that notion. I'd have to, read a little bit more about it. In colleges, we have African American studies, we have Latino studies. There are a lot of studies. We have indigenous, studies. So there are lots of areas where students can become very expert at knowing things, but I really don't know what the course, what would be the full range and philosophy
So
of
you didn't
course.
approve it or any of that? Or
No,
the Board of Regents didn't approve this initiative?
Well, even if that were to come forward, this is not something that is part of our purview. We do not approve curriculum of any kind. We leave that to the districts and to the schools. And even in higher ed, we are not involved in approving any of the higher ed curriculum. That's not part of what we do. So we do, but I would be interested to know more about, the thought behind imposing that type of a course. And that would have to be, obviously, not within our purview.
Regent Ferrer, we thank you very much for your time. Looks like we have exhausted our questions for you, and you have been more than generous with your time, and we appreciate the expertise in which you answered them. Continue to serve, and please, have a great day. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
We will now leave the city of New York and travel upstate. We have had a resignation of one of the regents from the middle of the state of New York, and so in District 7, there is an opening for a new regent, and we have two applicants for that position. We will interview the first right now, and Adrian I. Hale will be escorted into.
Grab a chair.
Yes, and as Ms. Hale is being brought into, I'm sorry, Mr. Hale is being brought into the room, we are also joined by two assembly members, three assembly members, Assemblyman Meeks, Assemblywomen Ms. Clark, and Assemblywoman Lunsford. We also have the honor of Assemblyman Harry Bronson coming in to join us. And now with a full house, we welcome you, Mr. Hale, being here. And what we have here today is more or less an informal back and forth, okay? We will start with you to please tell us, sort of 5-6 minutes about yourself, why you want to serve, what you want to do as a regent. And once you have made your brief remarks, we will open the floor up to questioning from the panel here, okay? And it looks like it's a long panel, so please start us off, and the floor is yours.
So first off, thank you so much for this opportunity to come before you all and tell you why I would love to join New York State's Board of Regents. Currently, I'm the Economic and Community Development Director for a company called Foundry in Greater Rochester. That's a blockchain technology and decentralized infrastructure company. And before that, I'm the immediate past Senior Manager for Workforce Development, Economic Development, and Education Initiatives at the Greater Rochester Chamber of Commerce. Before I go into what I'm doing now, though, I'll give you just a little bit of my backstory. So I grew up inner city Rochester, one of the poorest zip codes in the state, 14621. And I saw in my household much of what many kids in Big 5 districts see. I had a parent who was incarcerated. I had a mom who worked far too many jobs to keep food on the table and a roof over our head. I had a brother who ended up leaving our home through the foster care system, a sister who got involved in some of the activities in the streets of Rochester, and she left behind a beautiful baby girl who's my oldest niece that at 12 years old I had to step up and help my mom and raise my niece. So I'm very familiar with what those struggles and everyday kind of roller coaster activities are in some of our family and students' households. But in the midst of that struggling and that suffering, I knew at a young age I wanted to be someone who could help make an impact on behalf of folks who had a shared lived experience and help alleviate that suffering, because I don't think anyone should have to go through that. So at the end of high school, thank God I graduated. Instead of going off to pursue a track scholarship at Alfred State, I joined the U.S. Marine Corps. I did 5 years active duty. I did 2 combat deployments to Southern Helmand Province, Afghanistan. And I always tell folks this, it wasn't about the skill trade that the Marine Corps gave me or even taking me out of a bad situation. It was the experiences that got to cultivate the intangible things like confidence, self-esteem, being able to handle danger, things of that nature that I think propelled me to being where I am today. So I got out of the Marine Corps honorably. I went through the turbulence that most vets go through when we get done with active service, especially having seen combat. And I started my academic career at SUNY Monroe Community College. And from classmates, professors, leaders in the community that poured into me, I was able to be awarded the SUNY Chancellor's Award and then transfer off to Yale University, in addition to re-enlisting in the Air Force Reserve to put myself under some accountability. When I graduated from Yale, I came home at the invitation of Bob Duffy, who had just left being lieutenant governor at the time, to go to the Chamber of Commerce, and I was the youngest African-American executive in the organization's history and the first openly LGBT executive in the organization's history. And I had the charge of finding ways to get the Chamber involved in ways that it wasn't at that time. So immediately we set up the Office of Education Initiatives, Workforce Development, and Talent Strategy. And I went to work. I found business leaders who were passionate about fixing things in Rochester. And the first thing we created was an organization called Pencils and Paper, which was a non-for-profit that gives hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in school supplies to teachers and students within our city schools. I also created a program called the 4 E's. So at the end of graduation, it was about prepping kids in secondary to either be ready to enroll in college, enlist in the military, become an entrepreneur, or become employed. At another site in Rochester called East High School, we created a program called Mentorship to Employment. And this was to intervene on behalf of at-risk students who showed promise but needed an extra nudge to have a mentor, get a job, start making some money, to hopefully get them over the finish line of graduating from college. And then as a member of our Democratic Chronicle editorial board, I helped spearhead an effort called the Time to Educate Project, which was a public information campaign to get the community engaged in our city school district so that everyone can find a meaningful way to help improve the outcomes of our students. Last but not least, it was from my work there that I went to my current company, and now I oversee an educational effort at every stage in the P12 pipeline. At the primary level, it's called DeFi, which is a play on words, Decentralizing Education for Youth, where we're really focusing on ensuring kids have math skills. There's no way they'll be able to engage in the technological future in the workforce if they don't have strong math skills. At the secondary level, it's an introductory blockchain technology course that will make sure that the use cases that will solve some of these challenges in the future, that technology will be in the hands of these students and they'll be able to develop those kinds of efforts. And then last but not least, the Mining Engineer Fellowship, which is a 2-year on-the-job training apprenticeship taking recent graduates from our city school district, training them in repair, troubleshooting, diagnostics, $60,000 salaries with a high school diploma. They went through driver's education. They all have licenses. They got transportation grants from the organizations to have cars, but they're also undergoing remediation in literacy and numeracy because when they first came in, even though they had high school diplomas, they were only proficient at 2nd and 3rd grade levels. So that's some of the work I'm doing now. I look forward to questions, and I hope I didn't take up too much time.
Thank you. Mr. Benedetto, our chair of our Education Committee, has stepped away. He said he will be back momentarily. I'm Assemblywoman Fahey, chair of the Assembly's Higher Ed Committee, so I'm just filling in for a moment here. And I guess I'll kick off with questions, as I guess I've been doing all morning. So I'll jump right in and then turn to our Senate colleagues. Thank you, and thank you for your service. Thank you for stepping up to apply for this unpaid but very critically important position. And thank you for your passion as well. A couple of questions, because we're going to try. I have a feeling we'll have a lot of questions here as we've been joined by a number of colleagues. COVID, I'm trying to be consistent. I've been asking this all morning. We've just went through 3 years of trauma and still coming out of it in so many ways, but our families, especially our students, have been affected, maybe permanently, some more temporary, we hope. But we are seeing across the country a whole host of missing students, missing at the elementary, secondary level. I'm a new higher ed chair. We are already suffering with lower enrollment drops for a whole host of reasons at our higher education institutions, and the projections are not good if we are missing hundreds of thousands of students. We don't even have a good estimate on it. So at the same time, we have a Blue Ribbon Commission on the Regents' tests, looking at and wondering how we maintain rigor in the standards. So if you can address what you might do to recapture those students, how we turn around this enrollment, and then if you could just add on to say, What made you decide, clearly you bring a wealth of experience, what made you decide to step up for this? What would be your, based on your career, based on your experience, what are your key objectives for joining or for your interest in joining the Board of Regents? Thank you again.
So a couple questions. I'll start where you started. First is students and parents have to feel safe about sending their kids to school. Whether it's a health concern, a violent concern, they have to feel safe. At the schools that we're involved in Rochester, the two leading causes of chronic truancy is violence, weather, and obviously health. All things that I think that we can do something about. That's the first part. The second part, as far as like how do we recapture them, I also think students have to want to come to school, and we have to open up the fact that we live in a technological world now, and curriculum and instruction has to be relevant. So even with the students that we just recently employed at my organization now, they gave me a laundry list of things that, in short, I'll just say it's like the literacy of life. Things like a credit score, getting your driver's license, how to buy a house, how to buy a car, how to take on debt, how to get out of debt. I mean, all these different things. We have to give kids a reason to want to be there. And I think no state is more primed to do that than us. I think in a lot of ways, people always look at New York as a trendsetter anyway. So this is a perfect example to lead on. The reason I put my name forth to fill this vacancy is because I'm a workforce developer. I'm also a diversity, equity, and inclusion practitioner. And I think if we're gonna build a society, there's just a lot of talk about our democracy and how important it is. We understand that civically engaged citizens is the cornerstone to any democracy. And if we're gonna ensure that equity is one of the guiding principles of our society, education has to be the center of that. Like, we have to ensure a system that serves each community uniquely the way they need to be served. And I just think that's an excellent place to start.
Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Yes, Senator Mayer.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hale, for coming forward, and thank you for your service, but also your service beyond your service to this community.
Thank you.
So, as chair of the Senate Education Committee, those of us in the Senate with our assembly colleagues have struggled long and hard to find some solutions for the Rochester City School District. Now has a monitor, now has, I believe, a new superintendent, has had so much challenge in both outcomes and the experience of students, the experience of teachers, the board. It has been, one of the most challenging school districts, I would say, for the whole state. So if you get to the regions and you're going to have a loud voice about Rochester as a product of those schools, what are your thoughts about how to stabilize and rebuild or build a public school system that parents have confidence in, students feel is relevant, teachers want to participate in, and brings the community together in a way that results in real substantial educational achievement for every kid in Rochester who deserves it?
No, so a couple things here. I think right now in our community, the will is building because there's a movement to develop community schools right now, which I do applaud. However, if you look at the outcomes of the community school movement, 50% of schools in Rochester right now that are community schools are in receivership. 1/3 of the secondary schools in Rochester that are community schools are in receivership. I don't believe we're developing schools based on the needs of the actual community, but more so a academic or scholastic, innovative attempt at what does a community school need to include. I will define a community school based on its responsiveness to the community and ability to build efficacy as it relates to how do we ensure the product and that human being at the end of their tenure there. So if it's a K-5 or a K-8 or a K-12, to ensure that human being is actually meeting our expectations for them so they can be successful in life. I'll give you a perfect example. Right now, I had a handful of graduates who all came in and had to learn some pretty difficult stuff. Troubleshooting, diagnostics, all on technology, electronics, you name it. But some of them I could tell early on had learning specifications. I don't like using learning disabilities, but they had specifications to their learning styles, and they were unaware of what they were. If we're truly trying to build a community school around the whole child, but that individual doesn't know the modifications and accommodations they need to successfully learn. How do we expect them to be successful? How many times has that individual also, not just in a work environment, but in a school environment, been sat in front of a teacher instructing them and felt dumb or inadequate because they need modifications and accommodations, but they're unaware of what that is? So when we talk about a whole child focus of a community school, that is the cornerstone to ensure that every young man and woman understands what do you need in order to be successful as it relates to the acquisition of your education. Last piece I'll say is this. In that same area where I said violence and weather, right, community schools also don't have busing. So why don't we have a phone number for shuttling so that if it's snowing outside or if it's frigid temperatures, a parent can call a shuttle to help get her kid to school? So these are just small things we could do that could have a huge impact in improving outcomes and building system efficacy, meaning we are capable of producing the kind of human being we want to exist at the end of this.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Assemblywoman Clark.
Hello, Mr. Hale. Thank you so very much
morning.
for coming today, definitely for your service, beyond your service. So good to see you. One of the things I want to talk about, two things I want to bring up. Last time I visited Northeast that moved into the Charlotte campus of our city school district in Rochester, one of the things we were talking about school-based health centers, and we were talking about, actually having a doctor there and all this wonderful stuff. And one of the questions came up was, waiting lists and kids who needed mental health support and weren't getting it because they were on wait lists. And we know this is a huge issue across all our school districts. And they said, well, how many of your kids need it? And the principal of the school said, 100%. 100% of our kids need it. And at the same time, when we were at the Rochester City School District breakfast last week, Wade Norwood, who is already a Regents, mentioned that health outcomes so often define success in education, success in jobs, success everywhere, and there often is more money in health than there is in education. So pairing the sort of need and also looking at dollars, what do you see the role of a Regents that could have as we look at education policy, how we can really bring in that partnership to deal with what we also truly know is happening in our schools, which is a health catastrophe?
Yep. So, couple things there. I want to start with the piece around the mental and psychological wellness of these students. We know that anywhere from 50 to 60% of all students in RCSD have high ACE scores, which I would define as anything above a 6, adverse childhood experiences, number one. Number two, we can't have mental health supports that are only reactive, meaning you had an incident at home that night, it's bothering you today, go talk to this person. There already has to be a proactive strategy in place that helps us as a system meet the needs of these young people and their families. So two things here. The first is, and this is where I bring as a wealth of knowledge, we're building public-private partnerships. I know if we were able to design a system that really looked after not just the psychological and mental wellness of our students and their families, but also the emotional wellness, giving them healthy ways to deal with and cope with the turbulence of life that they're gonna have to be in, and building resilience, that we could find partners in our community that would help fund and support an effort to ensure that if we couldn't support each class individually, we could at least support clusters of classes or grades. You also know that there's a shortage of teachers as well, and I think a key indicator of that is teachers not having enough access to professionals, so it makes a job that is already hard even harder. So this is a key tenet of elevating the profession and making sure they have access to the professionals that they need. The second piece here is we can't negate how the current system is working against the best interest, because when a student is in class and being given instruction, you got one teacher, a class of maybe 20 students, and there's 3 to 4 different proficiency levels in that one class. So a teacher can only focus on Kids may be at or near grade level, and everybody else just becomes casualty. So we have to find a way to support teachers. We have to come up with a plan that we can build, support, and galvanize resources around, and it has to be proactive. And the reason student experiences is really important is because you can't build self-esteem, confidence, understand your motivations in life, or even more importantly, your purpose, when every day you're in a situation that makes you feel inadequate and already starts to build a habit of checking out.
Mr. Meeks.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon.
It's afternoon now?
Yeah, close to it. So just wanted to say first, hello, and thanks for being here and stepping up to the task of being a regent, or at least making it this far. So
thank you.
You mentioned the DeFi program with Foundry.
Yep.
Could you speak to how did you go about recruiting the youth, and what was I guess the toughest challenge in working with this particular group of youth, and how could you use the skill sets you applied to the betterment of a larger population of our youth in Rochester?
Yep. So the way DeFi program works right now is there's a handful of students at 58, and then there's a whole class at school number 9. So I actually called a bunch of different principals and said that I'm launching this program called Decentralized Education for Youth. We know that with the technology future that there's no avoidance of, kids have to have a strong STEM foundation. I think even the arts are important because they lead to creativity, which is also an important element, but I just want to talk about STEM for right now. And in order to develop that, you need fundamentally a strong math foundation. So that was the whole premise behind it. There's a provider in Rochester called Kumon Learning Center, which has a cool remediation process where they use high volume repetition, and they start young people off where they are. So you take an assessment with them, they figure out where you need to start in their program, and then they start you there. So I went into school number 22, 33, number 3, I mean, you name it, a bunch of different schools. I toured the schools, met with the principals, but it was something about number 9. They have a boys' academy there. At the number 9 Boys Academy, they already were kind of like teaching their young people how to have respect and building up some of those intangibles. So it seemed like even though like many of the other students that were in need, these kids were in need but already somewhat positioned to succeed. And so we launched it about a month ago with this full fourth grade class and with the student at number 58 school. And every day they spend about 25 to 30 minutes doing the Kumon program, which is the high volume repetition, and it's to get them away from being dependent on calculators or even using their fingers. I'll also add around DeFi that they have about till May 2nd until their New York State exam, but we plan on looping this same class in the 5th grade next year and continuing with those select students at school number 58 as well next year. But the premise there is really making sure they have a strong math foundation that we can scaffold and develop as they go on. And then what was the second part of your question?
How could you apply the skill set needed in working with,
yeah.
What was the more challenging, I guess, barriers of sort in working with the youth that you brought on board to Foundry, and how could you apply that skill set to a broader group of youth?
So the reason you hear me talk about the 2 leading causes of chronic truancy is because attendance is the number 1 thing. For this program of remediation to work, you have to do it every day. So you got to be in school, and then we need parent support over the weekends, which they have some pretty engaged parents at the Boys Academy, but it's really about attendance, which is why I'm already thinking about, even though there's no busing, what does shuttling options look like so that parents have an option if they don't feel safe with kids walking to school after there was a shooting in the neighborhood, or if it's frigid temperatures, or if it's snowing the next day, and the opt-out is instead of walk, we're just not gonna go. So I think attendance has been the first one, but there's already a culture, which I love about the Boys Academy, that they come up to you, they introduce themselves, they tell you the year they're gonna graduate college. So there's already the beginning of the poverty barrier breaking mentality there, helping them think long term, helping them believe in themselves and have faith in their actions, and really knowing that they are self-determined, that they can determine their fate every day that they go to school, and they try, and they apply themselves.
Thank you. Assemblyman Smith.
Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you for joining us. If we could bottle your energy, because I think it's just, it's contagious.
Thank you.
And that's something that, so I'm going to jump into it. You have a very different experience than a lot of people that sit on the Regents. Now, the Board of Regents, not only does it handle the educational structures around the state, it also handles professional licensing. So, you know, there is a diverse skill set of the Board of Regents. But I see what you're looking to bring to it. I think could add something very different. And I think you hit a lot of these things. So what would, if you were put on the Regents, and again, this job, you know, it's an unpaid, labor of love, if you will, kind of is what, you know, you have the regular meetings, but you can kind of do with it as you would. You know, you can travel the state, you can look at these things. What are some of the things that you'd think you'd do in the first year or two to try to, because I think you come up with a lot of great ideas. How do you implement those things?
So I want to go back to what Assemblymember Fahey mentioned earlier about being on higher education. I'm a workforce developer by trade originally. So even in the workforce development community, there's always been a conversation around certifications and is what we're asking of people align with the competencies that the labor market is actually requiring them as well. So when you look at either school systems or community colleges or even higher education, on the supply side, are we meeting the demands in the time limit? Because the private sector is on a time crunch as it relates to meeting their quarterly goals and whatnot. So the first thing I would say is there has to be better alignment between supply side, which is K-12, community college, higher ed, and on demand side, there has to be real communication about what you need, and then we have to be able to develop certifications or micro-credentials that say a person is certified to walk in and execute the functions, duties, and responsibilities of the job. So when you talk about overseeing all these various professions, as a workforce developer, I would love to do that. And I would also love to create partnerships between, especially our community colleges, because I think in many ways they stand at the sweet spot of a world recognizing that everyone does need a four-year degree. They lead in the workforce preparation and workforce training space already, and they typically have great relationships with the P-12 systems as well. So I think community colleges will really be a sweet spot to see what additional menu of offerings can we offer students, but also build relationships with private industry and get them invested in the training programs and curriculums so that they can get the team and the workforce they need on time to meet their objectives and goals. And so regions like Greater Rochester and upstate New York and New York in general can continue to thrive and show promise so we can stop and reverse this brain drain effect that we have now.
I think you bring up a good point. A number of us were involved for a couple years on this, what we call the Learn to Work initiative. That's similar to that, to kind of pair that up. And I know some years ago we found that some institutions of higher learning in computer science, in which you have an expertise in, were not really teaching the relevant computer languages that match up with the private sector.
Right.
So those are very, maybe not easy fixes, but they can be fixed, and it can.
And I'll add to that, right? Like, so imagine if you are a private industry and you just waited on somebody to finish 4 years of college, and then they come in and you have to retrain them all over again when that could have been a part of the curriculum from get-go. Especially since a lot of technology moves at the speed of light. So this year it could be relevant, next year it could be obsolete. Even in the industry that I'm in, we're constantly seeing innovations in the technology that we use. So it's really important when I talk about system responsiveness, yes, from a perspective of equity and meeting the needs of the people, but it also has to be responsive to the demands and forces of the economy if we're going to continue to have our schools and our workforce preparation, workforce training, and community colleges and higher educational institutions be key assets we leverage to bring in organizations and companies and jobs.
Well, it's our first time meeting today, but I think you bring an enthusiasm, and just talking to us today, something that might be helpful is your ability. I see you're on various boards, but being on this large board and communicating, acting as a body, it could be helpful if you can kind of help be the glue that kind of brings everybody together on some of these issues. So I'm very impressed. I'm also a math geek, though, so maybe I'll
Thank you.
Got him at the math.
Thank you, Assemblyman. Senator Stravitsky. That's right.
thank you for your offer to serve the people, not just the children, but all the people in New York State. We've got to have something more, though, than enthusiasm. And a little while ago, you mentioned the public-private partnership concept. Last week, I met with some folks from Rochester and from the higher education area primarily, but higher education or education and also healthcare services are a major part of the economy up there.
That's right.
And I'm from New York City. I chair higher ed in the state, but I'm from the city. How would you implement what you've been talking about in terms of utilizing the economic potential in the Rochester area? Because we are Senator Mayer mentioned it, we are very troubled by the Rochester School District and the stress under which it's trying to educate children. I want to be very brief, and I ask that your response be short answer, not the essay. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that, Assemblywoman. I will do my absolute best, but I'll be frank with you. Before I left the Chamber of Commerce, I was a part of 2 fellowships at the national level, the U.S. Association for Chamber of Commerce Executives, and then the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation. And I met with many of my peers across the country. At some point, we have to understand that a meds and eds economy is not unique to Greater Rochester, to Buffalo, to Syracuse, and that's an economy where predominantly the jobs are in healthcare or in education. Those jobs in general are just not paying the kind of salaries that most young people are looking for. So we have to find out where are we going to stake our future as it relates to future technologies like nuclear fusion or blockchain and decentralized infrastructure or Web3 or you name it. Where are we really going to stake our star as it relates to economic development and growth in upstate? So what I would do is try to leverage our educational institutions from P12 to our community colleges and our 4-year degree granting institutions and find out what training programs, what curriculum can we offer that would be attractive to an industry that as a region we decided we want to recruit to make sure we could make the case that we could provide for them a high quality, inexpensive workforce that will allow them to grow and thrive. The cost of living in upstate New York is some of the cheapest in the entire country. So that's already one benefit. We also have access to a plethora of natural resources that also gives us an edge. But where we don't necessarily get the edge right now is being able to provide overnight the kind of workforce that people need. Right now, when they read stories about Rochester, they read about crime. They read about a school district that only graduates half its kids, and of that half, only maybe 10% are proficient or career and college ready. They also read about various other social and civic disorders that as a community, whether it's our housing stock or our transportation, public transportation system, that the geography of work, it doesn't even support now, right? Like, we have to at some point really galvanize together and figure out what does our economic strategy look like? And we have to align all of our educational assets in a way to make the number one case, which is we could provide the talent that you need here very inexpensively compared to some of the other tech hubs that have astronomical salaries like Austin, like Silicon Valley, and New York City and other places like that.
Thank you. Assemblyman Brunson.
Thank you, Mr. Benedetto. Thank you, Mr. Hale, for being here. It's kind of weird calling you Mr. Hale. I've known you for a very, very long time. And as my colleagues have said, thank you for your service and also your service once you came home. And amazing resume.
Thank you.
You've done a lot.
Thank you.
But this is an interview for a region.
That's right.
So my first question is, describe what you believe is the role of a region.
So I believe in many ways our Board of Regents are the educational visionaries for our state. I think they work hand in hand with our legislature, with our governor, and they try to figure out what educational policy needs to look like, what do our professions need to look like, what do standards and assessments need to look like. And I think right now, if we're speaking to this time, this job couldn't be more difficult because the world of work is evolving, technology is becoming ever more a part of our everyday lives, and the world that we're graduating our students into requires a very different set of skills and a overall, I would say, human development than maybe previous times have demanded. And so I think right now regions have to be visionary. I think they have to be collaborators. They have to be able to build coalitions and teams. They have to be able to marshal resources. And they have to be able to work with you all to get things done. I know you all think this all the time, but I have to just say this from my background. We constantly obsess about California, Texas, Florida, and how we, even Pennsylvania at times, and how we are going to not remain competitive with them, but lead the charge so that people are looking at the steps that we're taking and wanting to modeling their reforms after what we're doing.
Okay.
So I think that's the role of a region right now.
Thank you. What's the role of a region when it comes to higher education and licensing our professionals?
So I kind of just got to that a little bit with Assemblymember Smith, but as a workforce developer by trade, we have to be willing to look over, so there's constant frustration from the world of business about waiting for too long for students to finish their curriculums and graduate and get through full-time enrollment. I think right now, especially the community college piece, we need to be willing to look at our professions. What are the actual competencies that are needed right now? What are the ones going to be in the future? And ensure that higher education is able to respond to those needs and build the kind of courses and curriculum offerings that will continue to provide for the world of work those kinds of skill sets. That's the difference between a young woman or man deciding to go to school in Wisconsin or Florida and wanting to come to school in New York, based on the quality of the program and the prospects of getting a gainfully employing job afterward. So you have to, going back to that, you have to be willing to work with industry, work with the schools themselves, find out ways to modernize and elevate the professions to the 21st century standards, to know the competencies and the responsibilities and duties that the job is calling for now and implement them.
So the Rochester City School District has been brought up a lot. We know they're struggling. We also know that they have a student population of around 22,000 students, and on any given day, 2,000 of those students are living homeless. We also know that roughly 1 in 2 of the children in that school district are living in poverty. You lived some of that experience.
Right.
We've had a lot of debate in our community about the Rochester City School District. Seems like whenever we have that debate, it goes to governance. Where do you stand on mayoral control, and where do you stand on state takeover of the Rochester City School District?
Very important question. So let me back up some. Right now, I feel like in general, whether it's a family leaving the city of Rochester and moving into one of our suburbs to put their students in a suburban school, or a family exiting the district and putting their student in a charter school, the messaging being sent to the public leadership is that we need to create a system that works. Right now, the system isn't working. I don't think mayoral control is going to be a system that works, and I don't think state takeover would necessarily work, because even when we've engaged with the state up till now, we've got a distinguished educator a couple years ago, now we have a monitor, and just those modifications alone haven't necessarily led to a turnaround in the city schools. What I think we need to do is a couple things. Number one, find out where the real breakdowns are, and I've talked about some of those today. You have young people in class right now who don't even know what their learning specifications are, and it's hard or difficult for them to learn. You talked about homelessness, but even in that sense, right? Like, school has not always been seen as a place of refuge from homelessness, which it should be a place of hope in the midst of that desperation. So it should be the first alternative to a life on the street should be, I want to get my education to see my life change at the end of this. But most people in poverty can't even think long term when you're thinking about right now and today. So what I will offer is, number one, we have to figure out where are the fundamental breakdowns. I talked about some of them where, like, just community schools not having busing but no means to provide transportation for kids to get to school. Chronic absenteeism is another issue. Kids with learning specifications is another issue. And then even of students who do attend school, we don't talk enough about the impact that violence, poverty, homelessness, and other modes of destabilization have on individuals, and how do we lead them through the grief, the healing, and the trauma that creates. So if we're serious about the community school design, which I believe that is the answer, meaning that we have an educational asset in communities that are highly deprived, but it provides what they need. It's also relevant to what they need to learn today, and is able to put and position itself in a long-term plan that person has for their life. That is the answer out. And I think that's going to be a combination between local leadership, state leadership, and if I'm so fortunate, Regent leadership.
Thank you, and I don't know if the chairs will allow, but I would go for a second if we have that opportunity.
I don't think we're going to allow that. So why don't you ask your last question right now?
All right, my last question is, so we talked a lot about urban school K through 12, using Rochester as an example, but we also have suburban schools, some of which have similar issues. In my district, Rush Henrietta, which you're very familiar with, but they seem to be doing quite well, even though their demographics are similar, both in terms of socioeconomic as well as racial demographics. But we have rural schools. And, you know, a region is at the 30,000-foot level. You're talking a lot about the implementations in the school district. What are some of the broad brush objectives and policy decisions that you would be promoting in the regions to address, and we'll just stick with K through 12. Address K through 12 education as it relates to not only urban setting, but also suburban settings and rural settings.
So it's funny you mentioned that, because the change in standards, there's going to be a lot of suburban schools in Greater Rochester that find themselves in receivership in the next year or so as well. Also, there's demographic shifts in suburban schools, Rush Henrietta, like you just named, and Greece as well. But the funny thing is, the rural conditions really aren't that much better than some of the inner city conditions, as it relates even to life expectancy or HIV/AIDS rates or STI rates. I mean, just young parent, like there's a lot of similarities between inner city and rural settings, but what they also both lack is opportunity that is tangible and in reach. I'll also say that I think it's important for somebody that is considering the Board of Regents to be able to speak to what happens on the ground, because I think all too often policy is made at the 30,000-foot level in a vacuum, and then it doesn't execute well on the ground, where I think what I'm making my claim is I will take programmatic efforts and the learnings and different things that I've gleaned as I've developed programmatic efforts by evaluating their success, what we're controlling for, not controlling for, what bottlenecks show up, what unforeseen kind of issues show up as well, and now using those learnings to inform institutional practice. And what rural communities need really isn't that much different than what inner city communities need, which is opportunities, but also to understand, most importantly, the difference between poverty and poor. And for some people, access to opportunity in and of itself will be a cure to being poor. But I'm learning more in my work as a workforce developer, educational advocate, that poverty is really a condition of the human state, where your mind, your behaviors, your emotional state, your ability to build relationships, all are impacted. And in many ways, you become your greatest threat, because even when given opportunity, you're not automatically programmed or wired to make decisions that are in your best interest. So I don't think, I mean, yes, there's definitely going to be differences, like rural schools definitely need to have a more robust conversation around transportation and things of that nature. But in many ways, problems are very similar, and there needs to be the same focus on opportunity, the same focus on grief and someone's psychological and mental wellness, the same way you would in an inner city school.
Thank you, Mr. Hale. Mr. Pirazzolo.
Hello, Mr. Hale, welcome to this. Thank you very much. I appreciate your service. I am from a business background, like yourself, and I find your testimony here today to be stunning. It's fantastic. You're like a breath of fresh air. So many times when people come before us, they just repeat pedagogical mantras, And while enthusiasm, and your enthusiasm is fantastic, while enthusiasm may not be everything, I do think enthusiasm is a very essential part of what we need when we bring people onto the Regents. You seem to have a depth and breadth of experience that I find, as I said, like a breath of fresh air. I was going to ask you to answer some questions in a format that you have already been doing. So I just want to focus maybe on two things and just allow you to go. So what I find very nice and refreshing about your testimony is not only do you talk about a specific problem or a problem with the educational system that there is, but here are my solutions or suggestions. That is something that I don't think anyone has ever done before that I'm aware of. So thank you very, very much for that. So I'd like to give you the opportunity to pick an educational area where you think that we have been somewhat lacking and what you think your solution is to that. And then I'd like to continue on with Assemblyman Bronson said about licensing. So many of our professions right now, because of the internet and newer technologies, what was important 20 years ago may not really be important right now, right?
That's right.
And how do you feel about changing the scope of certain practices to incorporate different technologies or just broader scopes of education and say, well, you know, that may have been important, but this is more important today. So the floor is yours.
All right,
whatever
thank
you'd
you.
like.
So I'll actually go, I'm going to go back to, you said pick a topic, right? So I'm going to go back actually to literacy, because we already knew there were literacy deficits in our schools in Rochester prior to the pandemic, but the pandemic has only exacerbated those gaps. And it's difficult to even teach students math now. Assemblymember Meeks, following up on your point, you can't do a math word problem if you can't read the problem. Right? So I think I can't hammer home enough the importance of literacy, and we have to have a targeted effort in ensuring that kids can learn. And to your point, this is where technology has an impact, but it could be an adverse impact, because even now we're seeing some kids formal writing, including text verbiage and kind of like texting language, and that won't necessarily get them to where they need to be. So I can't hammer home enough how important literacy is. The second thing, we have to find a way to not just give that student a hand up in the classroom, but we have to find a way to give them and their families a hand up in the household. It's difficult for kids to be engaged in the acquisition of their education if there's turbulence and instability in the household. So we have to find a way, and whatever that household looks like, but we have to find a way for families to be able to support their scholars while they're in school. And then to your last piece about the professions, and you're absolutely right. Not only is technology going to change the way some of these professions operate, but in some ways technology will threaten some of these professions altogether. And so what I think we need to do is be, again, proactive, and this is coming from, if you're a good businessman, you know you want to be proactive in the market, not reactive to the market. By the time you react, you're too late. But you want to be proactive to look at, if we project out what emergent technologies right now pose the possibility of replacing some professions that currently exist, what technologies could assist professions that currently exist, and what is the necessary role in how we provide learning, in partnership with technological, tools and resources too. So those would all be conversations I would definitely bring to the table if given the role of Regent.
All right, thank you. I'd also like to point out that in a lot of your testimony, you were talking about the area of Rochester.
Yep.
And while I feel what you're saying is important about Rochester, and we all know that, it's really indicative of just about any school district in the state.
Right.
So I don't want it to be thought that maybe you're just limited to Rochester, because what you're saying is true everywhere in New York. So
That's right, and I want to just hone in on this, right? Because whether it's the Chamber of Commerce or now at Foundry, program creation and then evaluation and development has been something that I've constantly had to do. What this will do, though, is allow those insights to be carried over at an institutional and systemic level. So we have to be thinking in terms of systems change. And I also come from a DE&I background, so when we talk about systemic racism, it's also important that we recognize that as it relates to public tolerance and some of the outcomes we see, black and brown, or like Assemblyman Bronson brought up, rural outcomes, that the fact that we tolerate them tells us that for the majority of folks, are these systems doing what they were intended to do? And if so, how do we change that, build system efficacy so that the outcomes and results we want to see are able to occur?
Thank you, sir. And to close out this session, we have Ms. Lunsford, you have a question for us.
Hello, Mr. Hale. I have one quick question. I'm going to encourage you not to use all your time. We've lost a fair amount of students in the Rochester City School District to charters, and I'm wondering what you see the role of charters playing, especially in the city school district, but you can speak to the broader community as well. Do you think that's the right path, and what do we do to get those kids back in the public school system?
Full stop. We have to improve our public school system. That's number one. Number two, I don't look at charter schools any differently than when a parent leaves our city in order to move to a suburb to offer their kids a better educational opportunity. I think originally charters were conceptualized to be innovative, kind of, we can test out an athletic school or an art school or something of that nature, but now it's kind of being used as a hobby horse that is using in many ways to cripple our public school district. Right now, every effort that I currently have going on at Foundry are all in partnership with RCSD because there's an unyielding commitment to fixing our public option. And every day that we allow parents to have to decide an alternative to their public option, we know we're doing them a disservice. And that's where I'm at on that.
Thank you.
I hope I did it quick enough.
That was very quick, less than a minute. Good job.
Mr. Hale, I thank you very much. You certainly have made an impression upon everybody on this panel. Certainly, we will consider you seriously. I thank you for your time and answering the questions as honestly as you did, and we wish you good luck, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
No, we're going right on.
I was afraid you'd say that.
We have one more candidate. For today, we had two more candidates, but apparently the last candidate we were going to interview has dropped out of consideration, and so we are going to be interviewing another candidate from the Judicial District Number 7, Ms. Nahoka O'Connor. Okay, and who is joining us right now. Ms. O'Connor, we welcome you. We thank you for your patience in waiting, for your time to come before this panel. What we have before us are various elected officials, both from the Senate and from the Assembly, who are interested in your candidacy and fulfilling the Judicial District Number 7. It is going to be a casual, if you would, conversation, and we ask you to spend about 5-6 minutes or so taking your time explaining to us why you're running and why you think what are the benefits of us selecting you, okay? And after that, it will be our turn to take the floor and ask you a question or two and see how you answer. So at this particular time, again, welcome, sit back, and
Relax.
and begin.
Thank you so much. I wanted to thank you, Maria, also. I think she's in here somewhere, for helping me get here today. Thank you, distinguished members of the legislature and fellow candidate Adrian Hale. I had a great conversation with him outside. I know his contribution in our community has been invaluable. So my name is Nahoka Kawaki O'Connor. I actually go by Kawaki O'Connor. I'm never an O'Connor. I'm either Nahoko or a Kawaki O'Connor or a Kawaki. Some of my kids' friends call me Dr. Ko because it's a little bit easier. I always say there's only one Nahoko in Western New York, so really you only need to know my first name, like Beyonce or Madonna or Prince. So I want to tell you a little bit about myself, but you may think that I might look familiar. I was actually here, not here, but in front of many of you 2 years ago during the Zoom meeting in which you asked me what's the best temperature for a classroom, and which is, I looked it up afterwards, and also what time people should start school for high school students, which is after 8:30, which is what I found out afterwards. But, so I was here 2 years ago, sitting here in front of you, sort of telling you about my interest in this position. I was born and raised in Germany, actually, by 2 Japanese immigrants. I completed my elementary school and public school in a rural village outside in Germany. And then I completed my middle school years in Japan, in Tokyo, not so rural, also in public school there. And then my high school years I completed at a public school in San Diego. So for me, I am indebted to Mrs. Capel, who was my ESL teacher, which we now call ELL, or English Language Learner, English as a New Language, for being able to speak in front of you today. I'm also a parent of 3 public school students. I have 2 high school students and 1 middle school student, 3 teenagers. And I'm also a faculty in the Department of Ed Leadership at the Warner School of Education, as well as the Director for Program Evaluation at the Center for Professional Development and Education Reform. So what that actually means is that in my practice, I get to work with school districts, nonprofit organizations, and other programs of informal learning to support them in understanding what their impact is in terms of their success in their programs. So oftentimes when people get to meet me as an external or independent evaluator, they often say, oh, the devil has entered the room. But for me, and the way that we work in terms of evaluation is in a collaborative way, so people can really understand what they want to understand about their organization. And instead of just proving something, thinking about ways that we can improve things. So we collect systematically quantitative and qualitative data. We explore sort of the questions together, and we often do data analysis together because I'm also trying to build data literacy among educators to understand what's happening in the organization, but also hopefully once I'm no longer there, they'll be able to continue to sort of in this self-improvement cycle. Let's see. I see the clock ticking, and I do remember thinking 5 minutes is not nearly enough to just talk about what I'm thinking about in terms of education. But there are sort of 5 things that given this chance to be in front of you, I wanted to sort of share as I have seen the priorities. So my original area of expertise was in access to higher education. Being an immigrant myself, the opportunities that I was able to be exposed to in my higher education years was so powerful that I wanted to make sure everybody had that opportunity. Of course, we know that access to higher education is inequitable, as well as the quality of education in PK through 12. So my interest was in access, but as I started looking at the issues, I saw there is a leaking pipeline just going down the line. We have high school graduation that's inequitable across the board. We have tracking in terms of AP courses, honors courses, that's disproportionate of how people are being tracked into those. We have career and technical education that's really important, but also, again, if you look at the numbers, it's disproportionate as to who has access to those. And then, we looked at 3rd grade reading and all the way down to thinking about literacy. So one of the big issues that I am a proponent of is early literacy, and I do think that literacy is one of the major social justice issues that we have. I think we have to, there's a lot of debate right now in terms of, how to go about teaching kids how to read, but really what we need to do is have this mindset that learning and to read and play are not mutually exclusive. There's a lot of this proponent of if we teach them how to read, we're depriving them of sort of these social developmentally things, and I have seen incredibly skilled educators be able to infuse learning to read in play, in their curiosity, in their inquisitiveness that we see in kids. Academic achievement is tied to wellness and social-emotional well-being. Those cannot be separated. I do really want to continue to advocate that the Culture and Climate Survey, which was piloted in 2018-2019, will resume because that stopped during COVID. But that climate survey tells us how many kids at their school feel a sense of belonging, have a trusted adult in the building, feel comfortable asking for help when they need it. These are indicators of great schools. And also, of course, making sure that people's culture and heritage and language are an asset, not only to their own learning, but to their peers' learning. 3 more things. Education must be relevant. Kids go to school because some kids are compliant, but if you ask them if they're interested in this, many of them will say, I don't know how I'm ever going to use this. I don't know how this is relevant. I remember saying, how am I going to ever use algebra? But there are ways that we can connect this to real life contexts. We just haven't really made the connection for them in the classrooms. So it's interesting to me that 30 years ago when I did go to high school, that my kids are still learning some of the same things in the same modality. There's been huge changes over the years. We can't ignore artificial intelligence. We can't ignore social media. We need to teach literacy around that, financial literacy. We need to make sure that, that the education is relevant to the students, that they want to be there, that they're interested. And that actually ties to assessment, the Regents exams, and other assessments that we have in place right now. There are studies that show that performance-based assessments, like they have in the Performance Standards Consortium schools that are mainly in New York City, they outpace students who are in schools that use Regents exams in terms of being able to write papers in colleges, oral communication, self-directed learning, their pay after 6 years of graduation, as well as civic engagement. Finally, I want to talk about teacher development and professionalization. We have to have systems in place where educators and teachers feel as valued as we value them. They need to feel cherished. They have one of the most important jobs in our world of educating our future and setting up what our future is going to look like. We have to give people the ability and time to work together, to reflect, to take new policies, learn about them, have buy-in, understand their values, and then be able to implement them. We do have to diversify the teaching force. There's a disproportionality in many fields, including education. So thank you again for this opportunity to share with you some of my thoughts related to education, over 5 minutes. Ultimately, I strongly believe that our democracy depends on our ability to provide the structures to facilitate free and critical thinking, the ability to see each other's humanities and our differences and appreciate them, and know that the diverse perspectives and life experiences make us stronger together. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. You have covered so many bases, there's probably no questions to ask you.
Nice try.
But somehow, I think we'll come up with a few. Ms. Fahey, I believe you would like to say something.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for coming before us. Thank you for coming back the second time, and for your interest in serving on this volunteer position that is so essentially important to our students and to our state. You have a wealth of experience, and that is very much appreciated. I'm trying to be somewhat consistent in my questions across today. We're just coming out of COVID, at least we hope we're coming out of it. A tremendous amount of trauma over the last few years, especially for our students and for our families on many, many different levels. And we are now seeing that we are missing children right across the board. I've seen estimates here. I live here in Albany where my children went to school, high poverty, high needs school system. Estimates are 10 to 12% of the students have not come back. We're seeing over 1 million across the country, unclear on what the rates are, but clearly we're missing students. At the same time, there's a Blue Ribbon Commission looking at the regents themselves and how do we maintain rigor. So if you could be as specific as in terms of what your objectives would be in terms of why you would like to join the Board of Regents, or why you would like to be nominated for the Board of Regents, and how you would address what I think is quite a crisis we're facing again in elementary, secondary education, and having a huge impact in higher education. I'm the new chair of the Higher Education Committee in the Assembly. And then, if I can just add, I've noticed you've attended some of our best institutions in the country, and I'm a little bit familiar with Rochester. My daughter went to school there. Pittsford is one of the, I see you live in Pittsford, it's one of the higher performing school districts in the region, if not the state. How would yet, we've heard a lot about Rochester today, yet so many of the needs are in our urban areas. I mentioned Albany, Rochester, and more. How do you make your recommendations be more than academic? In other words, how do we reach in and make sure that all students are served to the degree they might be in Pittsford or other high-performing districts? We have a have and have-nots, and it's not just a funding inequality. We have a performance and outcome. So if you could, again, address what your objectives would be, how we would get at this crisis that has really created, missing students now, affecting enrollments right across the board, and then how this is more than academic and really reaching in to some of our most troubled areas. I mentioned a couple of urban areas. Certainly we have challenging rural as well as suburban.
Yeah, so I feel thank you very much for that question. I feel very fortunate because of where I am. I'm also an affiliate faculty of the Center for Urban Education Success, and I have been sort of peripherally, but cheering on and learning about the school transformation process at East High School. I am mostly in RCSD schools around community school implementation evaluation, and also working with community-based organizations within Rochester. Just to give you a little bit of context, and at the same time, I've been down to Danceville, where it's a rural population, very different demographic, and at the same time, like you mentioned, facing a lot of the same challenges. I think it's a really good question. I think the reason one of the primary reasons I wanted to come is because to sit here and talk to you about these issues around education. I had such a great time last time. But the other piece is really thinking about how are we able to transform the structures and policies we have in place right now, so that it's really transforming education, that it can become equitable. And again, I think it is around making education and the curriculum relevant to the students, being able to have the contexts in place where students can really inquire, I am having this issue in my life right now. What are the ways to think about this? What do we know about this issue already? How does this fit into the larger context? And have that be inquiry-based so that they know the answer that they want to do. It's a survival mechanism. The curiosity is going to be there. So thinking about it in those terms, I think, would be really helpful. Now, you mentioned that some of the school districts are higher performing. They're higher performing in compliance and these Regents exams. Very much of I'm a pail and you put the water of knowledge in instead of like lighting the fire underneath. And so if you really think about it, some of these suburban school districts who have demonstrated to be higher performing, and again, this is not across the board. There's a diversity within all of these districts, but I do think that we have to think about how we value and evaluate success in these schools differently, so we don't continue to perpetuate sort of the negativity and the disparaging ways that we think about urban education. I think there's a lot of things that we can do to transform that.
Thank you. Assemblywoman Clark.
I have two questions. One, hopefully will be quick. We'll see. First, and it kind of one of the things you said kind of put a fire in my brain based on also the Rochester City School District legislative breakfast we had last week, talking about ELL. The thought around ELL, we have a growing refugee or new American population in Rochester, and we also have a heavily, obviously, historic heavy Spanish as a first language learners in our school district, in the city school district. And one of the things they said is that we sort of used to use ESL and now ELL as a way to sort of make sure people became proficient education-wise in English. What they're doing in one of the schools is making sure, it's not saying let's have you learn English and be educationally proficient in English, whether it's literacy or math or social studies or whatever. Let's also do it in your first language. to sort of say, we as a school could recognize that it's actually an amazing talent or an amazing skill to have to speak multiple languages. Why are we not at the same time educating dually in both languages to continue that so that person graduates really in a place where they have a huge skill that is in huge demand? Do you see the roles of the public schools sort of making that a different thing around ELL, particularly given your experience as someone who had to learn a language in schools, but to figure out ways to be proficient in both?
I do. I think that there are ways. I think that there are experts who can talk more about this, and especially teachers who are working directly with students. And you know, when you talk about ELL or English as a new language, it's not just bilingualism because you have a multilingual classroom. One of the things that I can tell you is that when I moved to Japan in 6th grade and I had to take the science exam, and I'll never forget, there was a picture of a weather vane, you know, the thing that, and I had to identify what it was called. And there was no way I knew what it was called. I knew what the function was, and I could explain that in Japanese, but I wrote in German the name of the weather vane, and my teacher gave me points for it, and I'll never forget that because it made me feel like, you know, I do know things. And I think that's sort of like what we want kids to know, is that like they bring a wealth of knowledge by being able to speak all these languages. It has nothing to do with intelligence. In fact, people often talk about if you're multilingual, you have like a wealth of knowledge. And so making sure that that is not something that people need to hide, that they can be proud of it and also teach each other, I think that's a huge asset. So that doesn't directly answer your question, but
Well, it gives me the base. My second follow-up, and I asked this previously of Mr. Hale, is really the connection between social, emotional, mental health, and learning. Understanding that there's oftentimes, we know health determinants and are more likely to tell us of your success or not success, your healthy outcomes, all these different things. How do you see the regents and sort of education really bringing those two together in a meaningful way? Because we know 100% of our students in the city school district, but most of our students across all districts need something.
thank you. It's a great question. I've been thinking a lot about this. When I talk to teachers, and we do a lot of focus groups and interviews, surveys, they're often like, this is so great. I just wish I had the time to take with students to talk about this and teach these things, current issues, traumas that we are seeing in our communities. When are we going to have time to talk about this if I have to prepare them for the Regents exams? And I'm not sure if that's a perception by teachers or if it's the actuality, but that perception is real. And so how do we make sure that we prioritize, how can we make those needs infused with our academic learning? So there are ways we can take current events and even like social dynamics that we can sort of talk about and learn about and build skills around it within the context of psychology, ELA, social studies, civic engagement. One of the things that I've seen trends in probably all districts that I have been fortunate to be part of is that you have fairly good social emotional learning in elementary school and how much they like school. And then and how much they like their friends. And then you go to middle school and suddenly it sort of drops in terms of how much they enjoy school, but also how much they trust their peers. And then you get to high school and it just goes all the way down. In fact, what's interesting is that in a lot of those high school situations, the kids feel they can trust adults more than each other. Now, I don't know if that's always been the trend. Like when I was growing up, I felt like we are a unified front against the authority, right, against the teachers. But I do know that teachers are making a huge effort to try to connect with students and make those safe environments, but we are not doing enough to make sure that there's peer-to-peer support, listening, communication, empathy, pausing, understanding that if somebody has a different opinion about something, it doesn't negate your self-worth or your opinion. I think we haven't done enough to address that, and I don't know where that fits in, but that's my observation with having looked at all of these school districts.
Thank you very much. Ms. Lunsford.
Thank you very much. And I'm also going to start with a question I asked the prior interviewee as well. We've lost many students, particularly in the city school district, to charters. And I'm wondering what you see the role of charters being and whether that's the right path and what we can do to bring students back into the public school system.
It's such a great question. So I have worked in charters and with charters and public schools. So when I'm inside the building, you wouldn't be able to tell sometimes if it's a public school or if it's a charter school. Charters are public. But one thing that I would say is that in terms of who has control and authority over the curriculum, over disciplinary, over some of these very fundamental things, I do think that if we can have sort of benevolent leaders, that's fine, but we definitely need a democratic process to have people have shared authority to be able to participate in that. And so that's one concern that I have about charters. The positive with charters is that there's a lot of less red tape that people have to go through, so they can innovate. They can really try new things that can be really, really amazing for all students. And so what we haven't, again, I think that there are pockets that do this, but I'm not sure what the role will be of the regions, but really making sure that there are opportunities to facilitate collaboration of learning between these institutions, whether it's private, public, charter. There are things that are working in both of these systems that we haven't shared enough. It should be a collaborative process. It's not meant to be a competition. We're all in this together. We're all thinking about the best for our children. I do think that choice is important for people to be able to have. I also know what it does in terms of the budget to sort of take people out of the public school system. But education is a public good. I think that's a fundamental thing, that's a foundation of our democracy. And if we see that slipping, I think that it's going to change the fabric of our country.
I'd like to go back to something you were talking about earlier with regard to Regents exams. There's been some talk in the general zeitgeist about the role the Regents exam and Regents diplomas play, particularly for students who are not college-bound. We have a big focus on CTE and introducing more CTE in schools. Do you see the Regents exam maybe falling to the wayside for certain students or finding a different path to graduation for people who are not necessarily college-bound?
I love that question. I love the idea or the questioning around for some students and other students, that maybe assessment would be not so monolithic for all students, considering the different pathways. I'm not sure how familiar, you probably may know more about this than I do, but I do know when I was talking about the performance standard consortiums, they're a set, so that we have one in Rochester, one is in Ithaca, and the rest are in New York City. What they do for assessment is, so it's an inquiry-based project that they do, and then for their assessment, they have a panel of 3 individuals. One is sort of their teaching coach, one is somebody from the community perhaps, and somebody from that industry or that area that they are interested in researching. And so what happens with that assessment is that if they don't, it's very rigorous, there are rubrics around it, it's all publicly available. If they don't meet it, they go, okay, go back. These are the parts you can improve upon. Go back and do these. So there is a process of revision and learning that actually happens through the assessment process. And who has ever revised their revision of the Regents exams from what they got right or what they got wrong? Probably not. And so, I would love to be able to see some of these different assessments. But you're talking about career and technical education. We have a huge need in filling the workforce and the jobs that are coming up. I was just talking about the semiconductor chip manufacturing potential in New York State and other places in the United States, and the skills that are necessary to fill those jobs. We don't have a very good pipeline right now to make that accessible, and if we do, it's not, if we have it, it's currently very inequitable. So what I want to say is make sure that when we create these career and technical education pathways, that we're really thinking about the future and what we need to do to fill some of these workforces, but also make sure that students have access to them early on so they can get interested very early on before we sort of like close up a lot of those imaginations that people have for themselves. Like, I think, people want to be an engineer when they're 5 years old, and then by the time they're like 15, they're like, I don't think I can be an engineer anymore because I'm not good at this, this, or this. But you are good at showing up. You're really good at working with hands. You have this other way of thinking about things that is very conducive to being an engineer. We have to give them those opportunities and see themselves in that context.
Thank you. Mr. Smith?
Thank you so much. And it wasn't me 2 years ago. It was actually Senator Mark Walczyk. And I think he asked about the Pledge of Allegiance, the temperature of classrooms, and what time school starts. So since you've already addressed those issues,
I apologize.
my question, you seem to be an expert in evaluative measures,
Yes.
assessment. So that's, I think, very interesting because every person that's on the Regents adds their own expertise. So, and I, by the way, I just want to comment, I liked what you just said because I have a 4-year-old, and to see her passion of going to school every day, and then to know that certain aspects of our current education system kind of beat that interest out of our kids, I think it's something we can all do a little bit better of a job. So I like that you have an interest in that. How do we effectively evaluate teachers?
I think that's a really great question.
And you don't have to have the answer today, but just if you've put some thought into it, I'm sure.
Yeah,
with your
I
expertise.
do. I think that it's important for teachers to get the feedback that they deserve in terms of their craft, their teaching craft. I think we need to be very clear in terms of the expectations that we have of teachers, because you can't fail people unless we teach people. And so I think that's one of the things. And again, I would say too, if we are evaluating teachers, we need to be very clear about what that actually looks like. We need to be able to show teachers too what that actually looks like, and we need to be able to ask them what it looks like for them, because oftentimes we all, even observers, even evaluators, come with our own biases. And so making sure that we have shared frameworks, shared understanding, I think is really, really important. It's interesting, when I do classroom observations, which I do a bunch of, I don't do observations of teachers. I do the observations of students, because a good teacher will get kids engaged. A good teacher, if you only look at the teacher, can follow the playbook of what good teaching is, but there could be people who are not engaged. So you could do that, you could do that instruction, but what a good teacher would do is say, that instruction is not working for that kid because that kid is not engaged. So I'm going to change what I'm doing right now to make sure that student is also engaged and can participate. And so I think, it's interesting to think about teacher evaluation. In that sense, teacher evaluation is important. I do think that we should consider emphasizing more coaching around teaching instruction and peer coaching as well, because if we can give people release time to see other teachers teach and make teaching more of a public sort of craft, we can learn from each other, because when we see somebody else do something, they're like, oh, I never have done that like that before, but it's clearly working. I want to incorporate that into to your own craft. And in terms of implementation, again, we want people to be self-directed under the same shared framework. We don't want people to do it just because they're told to do it, because that kind of implementation doesn't work, and the kids know it. So
policies that we've tried in the past with varying success. I remember some years ago they were talking about giving bonuses to teachers who were highly effective. I didn't think that was the greatest idea, because you want to encourage people to work together, not compete against one another. So I think you kind of addressed that you want to promote the collaboration. Also, as students are learning, and I mentioned to one of the prior folks that screened that, in my district, 75% of the parents are opting their kids out of school, out of the state tests. It's not because they don't think their students are going to do well, it's because they question the efficacy and whether that is actually providing any relevant feedback. A test given in May, and then you get the results in September, and you can't even necessarily read the results. So with somebody with that expertise, how can we improve that system? Is there a way that we can improve the state assessments to provide better feedback for the students, but also, some feedback on instruction?
Well, I don't think we should get rid of like benchmarking. I'm not saying we should get rid of standardized assessments, but they can't be high stakes. I think that's the problem. I think in the past, what we've done, or currently, I guess, is, we're really tying that the testing is high stakes. And like you said, assessment should be going towards learning. That's an investment that we spend a lot of resources on testing, evaluation. But if that doesn't get invested back into people learning, then...
So you're saying it should inform instruction?
Yes,
I agree
I
with
do
you.
think so.
So
I do
thank
think
you
so.
for your answers.
Now, I think, to close this session, Assemblyman Bronson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Doctor, for being here today. An amazing CV, a lot of experience in education, and an instructor yourself. My first question actually is a request. You list a lot of work that you've done, evaluation reports, publications, and presentation. You select which ones, but I would like you to share with us, part of it is my own self-interest because I represent Rush Henrietta,
Oh, yeah.
but I would like to see your report on the equity, diversity, and inclusion assessment of Rush Henrietta. I would also like to have you submit to us the cultural inclusive teaching. There's a couple of materials that you have. You select one of them, and so I can see that. I strive to be an anti-racist every day. I work at it every day. And you have a number of publications on anti-racist education, and I would like to select one of them, and if you would submit that as well. Kind of turning to that, you talked about access, but there's leakage as you go along the process. And you're probably familiar with the concept cradle to career. And in Rochester, we call that Rock the Future, of which I'm a convener. And that's a process where you follow the child and you follow the parent, giving support to the child's education, but also giving whatever wraparound services are necessary to help the child and the parents as well. My question for you is, explain to me how that might help with the access but the leakage, and how do we support, what policies can we use to support the education? It's not just the classroom, it's after school, it's summer learning, those kind of things. What's your thoughts about that?
It's a great question. Thank you for asking about those publications as well. I'm glad you only asked for 3 because that's all I can remember. Rush Henrietta, Inclusive Teaching, and the Anti-Racist Curriculum Project. I'll definitely remember that. And I just want to make sure that is that the NSF project that you're talking about? Okay, yeah, I'm happy to do that. So the question was, how can we leverage sort of the initiative like Cradle to Career, Rock the Future, to ensure we can continue to support the trajectory from cradle to career. It's a good question. I used to be part of the report card committee of Rock the Future, which does all the data stuff. But I often thought it was interesting because even though we might think that we work in collaboration, I do still think we are siloed. And I also think that there's a lot of interest and effort and intent, but in terms of how we collaborate, the processes and operationalizing that has not been as effective or efficient. Now, I don't love talking about efficiency because it has sort of a different connotation, but I do like efficiency for a greater good. So there's some things that can be made efficient that we don't need to continue to belabor. or reinvent the wheel. I think we do a lot of that. So I think thinking about what are some of the processes that we can fundamentally put into place so we can have collaboration among the different sort of constituents and different organizations, so that we can spend more time on the things that only human beings can do and only time that we need time for, that we need to invest time in. Couple of things come to mind that have been efforts towards this, I believe, and it's been more of a New York statewide effort, or nationwide effort, really, is around community schools. But if you talk to community schools and you visit community schools, everybody has a different idea of community schools and different idea of understanding of what that is. And maybe that's okay, because the community should ultimately determine what a community school is. But I think that there are some, it's not actualized, and I think it hasn't reached its potential of what a community school could potentially do. The other thing that I know there's interest around is sort of this integration of knowing who is being served by what service and has access to what service. So for example, you look at a child and they say, okay, they're part of the after-school program. We also know that they have access to their dental care at School 17, and you also know that and to be able to see what they all have access to. It's ambitious, and in another world, potentially, I think it could be incredibly powerful. But there are so many nuances around the ethics of data sharing and data ownership that I'm a little bit concerned about, not a little bit, a lot concerned about, that I need to see addressed before we can do that. But I think that's a potential that can be addressed if the right people are at the table.
So we need to connect you with with Congressperson Joe Morelli's systems integration project that we're working on. It may answer some of that. My last question is similar to what I asked the last candidate. Could you describe how you perceive the role of a regent, and then share with us how your educational and experience background makes you qualified to fill that position?
It's a really good question, because I tried to look and see what makes for a qualified Board of Regents candidate and what their responsibilities are. It's not very specific. And so my feeling is that it's not a one person has all of the tools and all of the experience and all the knowledge that comes. It's going to be a team effort of bringing different perspectives to the table, bringing different expertise to the table. I do think that I can bring a lot of expertise around sort of evidence-based practices, as well as sort of using data that we already have. I'm not a big proponent of spending a lot of time collecting data. I would like to use more time to analyze it and make sense of it and then do something with it. We spend a lot of time collecting it, but we don't use all of it. I know that. So I think sort of like the way, it's a great question, but for me personally, I think my role and my contribution can be sort of in that realm. And at the same time, I want to know what's coming down the pike in terms of the research that we know. There's so much understanding that we can have. And I'm not just talking about research that's published in peer-reviewed journals. I am talking about talking to the elders in the community, knowing what the issues are that's affecting people inadvertently a lot of times of policies that have been implemented. So I think that we need to have sort of this range of vertical, horizontal reach to, and both at the micro level and the macro level, to really understand how are we making sure that we're serving everyone. And in particular, I have to say, if we serve the people with the least access, we're doing a good job serving everybody else. I know that, so.
Thank you.
Doctor, thank you very much. You certainly did well for yourself. Quite impressive. I wish you well.
Thank you very much.
And this brings us to the end of our Regents interview for 2023. I thank all the applicants who have come forth. I thank them for their time and their answers. And I thank my colleagues who have spent the last 3 hours here, participating in this very important process. We are at an end.
And now it's lunch.